Calling this hearing to order. For the record, my name is Kenzie Bach. I'm the District 8 City Councilor and also the chair of the Council's Committee on City Services and Innovation Technology. This hearing is being recorded. It's being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. Today's hearing is on Docket 0417, Order for a Hearing to Discuss Digital Equity and Municipal Broadband in Relation to Affordable Housing in the City of Boston. And that's co-sponsored by myself, Council President Flynn, who will be joining us just a little late, and Councilor Julia Mejia at large. I'm also joined here today by my colleagues, Councilor Liz Braden, District 9, and Councilor Aaron Murphy at large. Written comments for today's hearing may be sent to the committee email at ccc.csit@boston.gov, and those will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. But if you are here in person for public testimony, you can sign up in the corner on the sheets, and we'll take that at the end of the hearing. And if you want to sign up for public testimony virtually, please email Shane Pack at shane.pac@boston.gov, shane.pack@boston.gov, and Shane will send you the link and add you to the list, and we can beam you in digitally also at the end of the hearing. We're delighted to have today with us both the Department of Innovation Technology and a number of their external partners so that we can really dig in on this topic. And it's something that I'm excited for us to be getting together to talk on, because I think it's something where the council's been a really strong advocate for resources for digital equity, and the department's doing great work. And so it's a good opportunity for us to all talk about what that is, because, as I always say, like we saw in the pandemic that digital equity, access to the internet, it's not a nice to have anymore. It's an essential thing. You can't, in the pandemic, you couldn't go to work or school or join anything like this without having that access. And so we can't have a two-tiered society where folks with more money also have that access and folks with less money are cut out. And so, that's important across the whole city of Boston, but one of the most focused ways that we can really fight that sort of two-tier dynamic is by focusing on having excellent internet access for residents of our affordable housing. And so that's kind of the slant of this hearing today. I'm really glad to be on this docket with my co-sponsors, Councilor Mejia and Councilor Flynn, because ever since I joined the council, we've been advocating on this front, and part of pushing both for additional money for Tech Goes Home, which I know we're going to hear from in a little bit, and actually the study that the department's going to talk about today, really looking at what that broadband access looks like in the city and kind of what the next steps can be to making access more equitable. So that was something that Councilor Mejia, who I will go to next, was really pushing for in one of our budget cycles a couple of years ago. And so when this report came out in the fall from the department, we never had an opportunity as the council to really talk about where we'd landed and what the next steps are. And so this hearing is kind of the continuation of that conversation. So I do want to let my colleagues have some quick opening statements, and then we will go to the administration's panel, and then we'll have a second panel after this one. But I'll go first to Councillor Julia Mejia at large.
Thank you, Councillor Bach and the chair, and for also your leadership in this space. It's been great to partner with you as we continue to navigate the digital highway here. So just wanted to just thank everyone who has been advocating on this particular issue. And, you know, during COVID, we saw the digital discrepancies, if you will, happening in certain neighborhoods. So I'm really looking forward to not just having a conversation about the conversation, but really laying down the infrastructure for what happens next, and how do we not only lean in, but really advocate for moving the conversation beyond here. You know, having grown up with very limited resources, everyone had the Nintendo back in the day. I don't know if you guys remember Nintendo. Mm-hmm. Atari, or you know, a PlayStation, whatever it is. There were some people who had it and some people who did not. And so I remember wanting Atari. You're absolutely right, Councillor Murphy. And I think I ended up getting a hand-me-down, and I was so excited that I was able to play whatever that was, Space Asteroids. Thank you. And I mean, you know, the reason why I bring this memory here is because for me, being one of the few kids on the block that did not have that particular apparatus to play really made me feel less than. And I think about all of the young people who right now have access to phones and things of that nature and little gadgets to play. There's still some that don't, but it's beyond games at this point. It's really about your livelihood. And so when you don't have access to quality internet and you're unable to work and you're unable to access vital city services, you know, because you just don't have access to the internet, this is why this conversation is so important. It is beyond luxury or privilege. It's really about really looking at this in terms of a lens of those who have and those who have not, and the work that the city can do to ensure that everybody has access to high quality digital access. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Mejia. Councillor Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm really delighted to be here this morning. This is a very important subject, and as you often mention, internet access, broadband access is like almost needing electricity at this point. It's a very vital utility for how we live in the 21st century. And during COVID, we realized all of a sudden the incredible inequity in our system, especially when it came to access for our young people who were trying to study remotely and their parents who were trying to work remotely. And it really pushed us to look at this issue in a very, very different way. The other thing I wanted to flag up was it's also increasingly with telemedicine that our elders and folks who it's needed to access our healthcare and remote work and education. And so many areas of our modern life are touched by the need to actually have access to broadband, and it's really important that everyone has access. And I look forward to the conversation this morning, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Looking forward to this important conversation, and I know many of my colleagues stated many of the things I also agree with. I also just want to put into this space too, it's such a huge responsibility now too, especially not just our young kids, but our seniors. You know, my 83-year-old aunt was asking me a question the other day, and I was trying to help her with her phone figure out how to do something. Or I was a special ed coordinator during the height of the pandemic in the schools, and knowing how the digital equity really mattered. Just because we were handing out Chromebooks did not mean kids were having access to education. So there's the plug-in, but then there's the follow-through, like, are people actually getting connected? And it's been brought up also, but you know, when your phone, that Irish Guild to me, where it reminds you weekly how much time you've spent on your device, and I always have to remind myself, like, I do so much on my phone now, though. I do like 90% of my work, if it's emails, if it's a Zoom. So our phones are not just for phone calls anymore. They connect us in so many ways if it's with, your doctor, your lawyer, your grandmother with a Zoom call, whatever it is. So it's important that we're having this conversation and that we're making sure that every family in the city of Boston has access to the digital, that they need. So thank you, Chair, for hosting.
Great, thank you, Councilor Murphy. And we've also been joined by Councilor Michael Flaherty at large. Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I look forward to the hearing. And it's been my experience sometimes here at the council over the years that sometimes something may already exist and/or we may already have partners, but because we're not talking to one another or because we don't have that information, we maybe unnecessarily assume that some things are not happening. So I'm happy to be here, obviously, and appreciate the Chair's willingness to convene the appropriate parties. I do know that we recently spent somewhere in the vicinity of $200,000 on a study that's somewhere in excess of 100 pages in length. I also know that we have a lot of high-speed partners in our city: Comcast, Verizon, Fios, RCN, Starry, NetBlaze, as well as a lot of the 5G programs that are out there. We also spend some very precious ARPA funds on sort of, connecting or bridging the gap in the digital divide. So look forward to hearing what our experts and our corporate partners have to say about it. I happen to think that maybe the city spending $1 billion on its own wireless network and 5G network is not money well spent, given that we currently have high speed in every corner of the city. My sense is we're just not talking to one another, and/or we're not aware of what our corporate partners are currently doing. So that's going to be a great education, I think, for the council today. We need to know who's doing what and where where not. And how do we, as a legislative branch of city government, collectively working with the chair and council president and our mayor and a variety of different partners, how do we solve those problems? But I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel by spending $1 billion of having the city have its own thing. I think that it's already there. We just need to talk to one another. And so that's look forward to hearing some of the testimony and find out where some of those gaps are, because I know that we've got some great partners. Every time you reach out to Comcast, Verizon, Fios, they're right on it. In fact, the beginning of this hearing, in all of our hearings, we have to inform the public of how they can access city council hearings. And we're constantly mentioning Fios, Verizon, Fios, RCN, et cetera. So we're there. We have the partnerships. Let's find out who's doing what. It's a lot like our colleges and universities, and particularly in the pilot program. We learn by way of public hearings as to what they're actually doing, and oftentimes we fall off the chair because we had no idea to the length and the level that they've gone to partner with our city. Our hospitals, the same thing. I say it all the time, we boast the best colleges, hospitals, and universities in the world, and a lot of times they're doing things on their own. They're not waving their big BC and BU Northeastern flag, but they're doing it. They're also some of our largest employers, but having them come down to the chamber and have just a very frank conversation, learning about the different aspects of the companies, what they're doing, and how we could expand on that's music to my ears. So look forward to working with the chair and hearing from folks today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Councilor Flaherty. And as I said, President Flynn will be joining us in a little bit. And to Councilor Flaherty's point, I think what's exciting about this for me is that this does not feel like one of those hearings where we sort of are like pulling people together for a conceptual conversation about things that we might do. This feels like a place where the council and the departments and our external partners, including Comcast and Verizon for sure, but also many of the nonprofit external partners that we'll hear from as well, like we're already charting a course together here. And like, I'm glad that the council funded that study. I think the municipal broadband conversation, I think we'll hear more from the department on that, but it's good to kind of know what that build out would look like. It's also good to know if there's more efficient ways to get to the people who are on the wrong side of that divide, what they are. And so from my perspective, kind of funding the report, some of the funding that went out from ARPA on helping get the BHA more connected, thinking about the money that the council's pushed towards Tech Go Home and other partners to get the affordable connectivity program subscriptions up in Boston. These are all things we're going to hear about from the department, but I feel like we're charting an exciting course on this front together, and it's unbelievably important for a more equitable Boston. So without further ado, I'll turn it over. We've got Santiago Garces, our Chief Information Officer, who heads up the Department of Innovation Technology for us here. He's joined by Peter Favorito, who's the Digital Equity and Inclusion Advocate for the City of Boston within the department. We've got Joel Wohl, the Chief of Staff for the Boston Housing Authority, and then Emilio Dorsoli, who's the Chief Executive Officer for Urban Edge, one of our nonprofit affordable housing partners. So we'll go to the four of them, and then just so counselors know, when we do go to questions, I'm going to encourage a few other folks who are in the stands to come up and sit behind the panel and kind of join for that, because in addition to folks on the Do It team, including our very own Carrie Jordan, who we continue to identify as a Boston City Council alum rather than a Do It Chief of Staff, although that is his role these days. We've got Mike Lynch supporting our Director of Broadband and Cable Office for Do It. We already celebrated his retirement, but he is still here to help us, so that's great. We're also joined by David Talbot, the Director of Research Services for CTC Technology and Energy, and Will Pfeffer, the Civic Technologist for the Massachusetts Area Planning Council, in addition to Michael Russo, who's the Director of Resource Development for Urban Edge, supporting Mr. Dorsey. So we've got a great set of people in the stands as well as at the panel, and we'll have all those folks available for counselor questions and follow-up. But now, Chief, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Santiago Garces. I am the Chief Information Officer for the city. Just as we start the presentation, acknowledge, as several of you have mentioned, the work that we're presenting is the result of deep collaboration between industry, government, and a number of community partners. There is a digital divide in Boston, and we will talk about where it is and kind of the strategies that we're using to address them. But the reality is that Boston is a city that has led in this space. We are giving Mike a pass from being in the hot seat because it is his last day, but the reality is that so much of what Mike has done in his career, bringing all the pieces together, is really remarkable, and I feel humbled that I get to share and now take the work forward. And we have a good relationship. We don't always agree as partners, but I know that there's a lot of opportunities for us to keep working together. So just jump right in. So as we conceptualize the digital divide, we know that it's a complex issue because it is not only about access to the internet, but rather it's about access to the internet, the devices that you use to connect to the internet, the skills and behaviors that you have when you connect. So it's really a complex issue that is difficult to isolate. Just, it's not just about getting broadband to a building. It's how is it that we make sure that the people that would benefit from being connected really have the ability of being connected in a meaningful way.
If you just say next slide, Ethan will move it.
Next slide.
Too.
Oh, there we go.
And then you don't have to worry if the clicker doesn't work.
I will skip the yoga moves. So this is a map, and I know that we've been having a lot of conversations around how is it that we can be more targeted in understanding where the gaps exist and how do we target resources. This is a map that is produced by Microsoft using data from the census, from American Community Survey, and other data points, where they've compiled a digital equity index that gathers information about all the different aspects of digital equity, broadband, devices, and whatnot. So, next slide, maybe. So, the issue of digital connectivity in Boston is one that is very specific and is one that is highly concentrated along income, so poverty, around certain other conditions that we know that tend to be related with other issues around age, disability, immigration status. So but just as a way of context, the data that we have is a little bit outdated. The American Community Survey questions get compiled over a 5-year average, but it is the best data that we have. About 12% of households in this period did not report having internet connections at home. It's about 12% of total households. On the other hand, in the past year, we've enrolled about 33,000 households. And just being honest, we don't know if it's exactly the same households. There's income eligibility criteria, but we've been able to connect 33,000 households with like free high-speed internet through the internet service providers, courtesy of the Infrastructure and Jobs Act that provided funding to cover these subscriptions. And we know that about 19% of housing units within the city are affordable housing units. They're income-restricted housing. So again, the issue exists, but the issue is much more targeted and much more pinpointed than it is in a lot of places. So I'm going to present an executive summary because I don't think that we've had an opportunity of sharing the results of the CTC study with the council. David Talbot is here to answer questions. So if the questions get hard, I'll just pass it on to David. So here are the key findings of the study. First, Boston does not lack broadband infrastructure. If you live in the city of Boston, you can request service from multiple service providers that are able to provide a high-speed, affordable network connectivity. All of the providers that are within the city support the affordable connectivity program, so you're able to enroll and get the federal subsidy. The latest incomer to the city was Verizon, which started their fiber build-out in the past 7 years or so. Since they started the build-out of the fiber on the south side of the city, including starting to address some of the areas that had the lowest income, highest affordability gaps, they're still building the network, and now they're building the network in downtown and these parts. But for the most part, every address in the city has the ability of getting connected through multiple providers. Comcast and Verizon reported that their service is equitable. There's no reason to believe at this point that the service is different in different neighborhoods. That being said, we know and we have heard from the community and from you that there are some people that experience different quality services, and we have some hypotheses around why that is. But at this point, it's not clear, and we don't believe that it is the cost of the ISPs, the internet service providers. There are other competitors outside of Comcast and Verizon, Starry, RCN, and others, and NetBlazer. And increasingly, we also see participation from wireless providers that are starting to provide wireless backhaul fixed internet service, including that of T-Mobile. And we think that continue to support competition and availability of service is a key part of the reason why Bostonians are able to enjoy affordable and high-speed options, and the competition is a key part of the strategy. I'm going to move quickly through this slide because we will actually get an in-depth view into some of these numbers. These are some of the high-level metrics that at the time that the study came out around things that we had been doing to increase connectivity, including participation in the Affordable Connectivity Program that we've talked that was funded by the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. At the time, we had 29,000 households. I'm happy to report that now the number exceeds 33,000 households. There's about 13,000 devices that were provided through the Emergency Connectivity Fund, and Senator Markey and other members of our congressional delegations have been really key in helping support the funding for these programs at the federal level. I have the city-funded Internet Essentials, hotspots. Long story short, we've been doing a lot of work, and this is not work that's just been happening over the past year, but work that has been going since before the pandemic, throughout the pandemic, and now after the pandemic to support our residents. There's still a gap. There's still a digital divide. We see that partially in the need and still in our ability to cover the number of households that are eligible for ACP. And when we get to it, we will ask you for help. We need the council's help and we need the community's help in bringing awareness around the affordable connectivity program and making sure that people enroll. There's particular gaps with the Hispanic community and other members of the community that tend to have a higher distrust of government, have higher barriers around language. And we need your help to make sure that people are leveraging these great resources. So getting to maybe one of the more interesting pieces of the analysis, there's a lot of conversations around, should the city provide a municipal fiber option? Should the city get into the business of being an internet service provider? And at this point, this is the technical assessment that just give you the bottom line. We don't believe that having a municipal option is the most cost-effective way of addressing the gaps that we have for a number of reasons. One, it's an expensive proposition. Two, that costs about $1 billion, and this is just a high-level number. There's more details that would need to come before we actually found like what the cost would be. Two, we would start from scratch. All of our fiber assets are leased for city and are provided by Comcast. Some of them are provided by Comcast and Verizon as part of our franchise agreements, and they're for city use only. Three, there's the funding that is available through the federal government would not necessarily cover some of these projects because the eligibility for the fiber build out is dependent on those residents not having any other alternative. So we wouldn't be able to use some of the federal funding that's available. So we know that there's still a gap, that there's a need to address affordability, service, and some of the other complex issues, but at this point, we think that because of the pinpointed nature of the problem, that we think that there's different strategies that are better at addressing the gap than building a municipal fiber option. Some of the findings of the study, and I'll be glad to, as we go in depth into some of the activities that we've done, I think that we've been doing almost all of the recommendations since the report came out in September pretty well. So we continue to work very adamantly to increase enrollment in the Affordable Connectivity Program. We continue to build coordination and relationship with BHA, with the schools, with the libraries, and with other partners and H-Strong to bridge the digital divide. We work very closely, and we're very grateful for the support from the Massachusetts Broadband Institute and from the Mass Tech Collaborative and the Commonwealth in the support for the city, and we can share a little bit about that work as well. We work very closely with community-based organizations who have deep relationships and in many cases are these communities that are underserved, and they give us their time and they give us insights around like what are the real issues that our residents are encountering. Continue to promote participation in existing device subsidy programs, and we continue to report progress, and that's partially what we're doing here is sharing with you all the where we are and what still needs to be done. Just wanted to put a little bit in context some of the investments and the things that are in the pipeline and things that we've already taken action on. So during the pandemic, a lot of investment, including $12 million from the emergency connectivity funding to be able to provide devices through BHA, through the BPL and BPS, supporting about 13,000 residents. We also deployed about $1 million to provide internet connectivity in 17 BHA sites. And we supported community-based organizations with funding for digital equity activities, so all the way from devices, connectivity, training, and skills. This past year alone, thanks to the support and the investment from the council, we've invested $3 million in Tech Goes Home, $1 million supported by the PEG funding, and $2 million from ARPA. In addition, we had $1 million for digital equity work that's been helpful as we bring capacity and start trying to leverage those resources to get further funding. We've also tapped into the DoIT's capital budget plans to try to address this issue. So we are happy to announce that part of that support will allow us to do assessments on the wiring and on some of the pieces that we believe might be missing in connecting affordable housing units. So since we know that broadband might not be one of the areas where there's a gap, we know that the conditions of the wiring from the entry point of the broadband to the unit and other pieces within the building might be contributing to poor performance for residents. So we are going to be working on assessing 3 buildings to get a really comprehensive view of the networking, to be able to start working with the state, with Mayor's Office of Housing, and with others to try to identify the size of the problem and how we can tackle that. We had about $100,000 from digital equity funding that we've deployed for increasing ACP enrollment, and I am really proud to, well, Peter deserves all the credit, but we've gotten $250,000. We're one of a few communities in the US that have gotten funding from the FCC to continue to do outreach for ACP. The next set of funding, we have not, well, before I jump into that one, I'll call attention to the one that's in the box because it's tied everywhere. The Affordable Connectivity Program has brought to our community about $12 million each year to connect residents. It is an incredible amount of funding, and we need to continue to expand enrollment because it means that low-income residents are going to be able to have free internet, there's device subsidies, and we need to be able to get more people that deserve and that need this help to be able to leverage it. And we will also need your help in working with our federal partners to make sure that the funding gets renewed once there's a finite amount of funding that was allocated for this program. So it's incredible. In addition to that, these are funding that we've requested that we haven't received, but we work very closely with the state. We have about $5 million that we've requested for partnerships that include partnerships around telemedicine, affordable housing, working with elderly adults and with other groups that benefit from this. And we have also requested about $600,000 in planning to support both how can we measure the digital divide more currently, not having to wait 5 years for the data to come out, and also in a way that is much more targeted around which are the pieces that are missing. Are people not getting connected because they are, they believe that it is unaffordable? Is it because they don't have the right device? Is it because they feel unsafe? All of these things we want to know so that we can develop targeted interventions. And there's more funding that we will continue to work on to make sure that we are leveraging all of the Commonwealth and the federal resources to address this issue. So we'll focus on strategies, and I'll pass along the presentation to our partners here. But I wanted to share one piece that is really exciting and dear to my heart, which is this year we've started building a governance process and a governance structure for the department. And it implies working closely with our internal departments and agencies. But one of the things that we focus on is creating this community technology coalition where we invited community-based organizations. We invited a lot of the people that are here today, where we meet quarterly to hear from them and understand where are the gaps, what is working, what is not working, and be able to help us align our resources and our activities, and to be honest, also hold us a little bit accountable, making sure that we're doing what we said that we're going to do with them. And it's exciting. Digital equity is baked into everything that our department does, and we have an amazing team of people that make sure that that is true. There's a couple of strategies, particularly when it comes to digital equity, that we have been working on. The first one is enrolling residents in ACP. As we mentioned, the level of funding and the availability of resources that ACP brings is not, it's hard to compare with anything that the city or the state would be able to do. And it allows people to get about $30 per month subsidy, which for a lot of tiers of connectivity, including all of these are broadband rated services. It's around 100 megabits per second. Residents are able to get service for free or deeply discounted. There are some challenges. It still takes a fair amount of work for people to get enrolled. There's a two-step process, and it involves interacting with the federal government and then with the ISPs. There's also, as we mentioned, issues when it comes to trust and when it comes to accessibility of some people that might have a harder time accessing the services. So the next level, the next strategy is one that is really exciting, and you'll hear from both BHA and from Urban Edge about different ways in which we've been tackling. Again, we believe that there's opportunities in how to bring the service, high quality service, from the street to the unit. And there's a number of actions that we're taking in that regard, including doing the facilities assessment that we mentioned to you. There's work that's been that you funded in helping us bring BONET to the BHA buildings. One piece that I would call, for instance, as well, is we think that the same way that competition and the same way that our infrastructure in the right-of-way has helped keep prices low and quality high, we need to be working on improving accessibility to the unit. And one area where there's a barrier where we would also like to ask the council for help is, we've talked with Verizon about this and we've talked with others, especially for people that live in multi-dwelling units, getting access from the ISP or through some alternative mean to the unit is a challenge. So even though an ISP or affordable housing operator would be willing to bring internet to the unit, sometimes the property owner will not allow that. And that is a challenge that we need to figure out how to drive forward. But again, so that middle bucket is around different things that we can do to try to bring this number. I tell you, my objective is to bring that number of disconnected households to be less than 1%. So from 12% to be less than 1%, and it is a tall order. I'd just say it's an ambitious goal. I don't know if we'll get there, but we are the city of Boston, and I think that we'll give it a shot. The last strategy, which we won't talk too much about today, is the notion of expanding free Wi-Fi, our wicked free Wi-Fi. Again, we think that there's an opportunity of connecting transit hubs, connecting public spaces. We believe that it is a supplement. The free Wi-Fi is not a competition. It is not a replacement for having internet at home. I don't think that people are going to write the next great American novel standing by a street corner with their laptop. But if you run out of data and you need to check your email or you need to check with your family members to see where they are, and you run out of data, we would like for you to have an opportunity to be connected and continue to participate while you're waiting for the bus or you're hanging about the city. All right, I'll turn it over to Peter, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the Affordable Connectivity Program and our efforts there.
Thank you very much, Santi. Can everyone hear me? Just wanted to
Yes,
double check.
and I'll take this moment to both say that we are joined by Council President Flynn, who's our District 2 City Councilor and also a co-sponsor on this, and to say that Peter is another City Council alum. So we are proud to have you back here sitting in the hot seat. And the same goes for Joel Wool, who we'll be hearing from in a minute. So lots of great alumni today. Peter, go ahead.
Thank you. You can't get rid of me that easily. No, but what's been amazing is that, coming from the city council background, you really develop strong ties to the community, especially, being born and raised here, and working with community groups and just knowing how active neighborhood associations are in this community work. It's really helped with ACP outreach and enrollment for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, we know that there's been a mistrust in government for a little while now, and so getting folks enrolled in this program, and because it's such like a multi-step process, we know that it can be challenging and discouraging at times, and so basically coming at it from taking a human approach to this has really made it that much easier to get folks involved and enrolled, and utilizing resources that already exist, such as community-based organizations, city departments who have specific ties to different populations who are eligible for the ACP, and so on. But just to kind of talk a little bit about the program itself, as Santi mentioned, it's a $30 a month internet subsidy program. $14.2 billion were invested in it at the get-go, the end of 2021, and it should be around for at least, ideally, through 2024, and that's why part of the reason why we're here is also just to help advocate for more funding to be put into it from at the federal level. But there are a wide range of criteria for folks to in order to be eligible for this. So you're looking at folks who receive SNAP benefits, WIC, supplemental security income. If you're a veteran, you have a veteran's pension, you're eligible for this. If you go to a school that offers free or reduced school lunch or breakfast, so pretty much, if I'm correct, every Boston Public School family is eligible for this. So it's not always tied to income or age or anything like that. You could be fairly wealthy and still be able to enroll in this program. But the point is, we are trying to get as many folks enrolled however we possibly can. And as you can see in some of the pictures there, I've been able to do it in kind of I've been trying to be as creative with the approach as possible. We know there's no one-size-fits-all approach, especially when you're working with different communities, and so getting out into the community has been terrific. It's one of my favorite parts of this job is hosting ACP sign-up events. That's the very first one was the Prince Hall Grand Lodge in Grove Hall, which was one of our Digital Equity Fund recipients helped set that one up. But it's very, I don't know, it's very rewarding just kind of getting to engage with residents and at that level, just because you get to answer questions from folks, and you get to really get to know the people who you're working with, and in terms of kind of spreading the word about this program, we've also taken a very creative approach. Not only have we been trying to advertise this on social media, digital and printed ads around the city, blurbs and newsletters, across different departments for the city. We have a lot of, like I said, we don't want to recreate the wheel, and so we're working with a lot of the Veteran Services, Age Strong, the Housing Authority, BPS, and their family liaisons to get all this information out to the folks who are in need of it. And so, whatchamacallit, as you can, and kind of just looking at enrollment over the past couple of years, we've seen a solid increase, and just to kind of touch upon a section where it kind of looks like it kind of dips down a little bit, and because, as Santi mentioned, this program is a little bit nuanced in a sense, because there's, after you're enrolled in it for about a year, you do have to recertify that you're still eligible. And my hypothesis is that some folks either didn't know to do that or had trouble doing that. But anywho, we're really, as Santi mentioned, we just received $250,000 to expand our outreach efforts. This will include money going towards folks who are on the ground with myself, and they're oftentimes referred to as digital navigators. Furthermore, just more marketing materials, more devices that we can use to get folks enrolled. And what's been terrific is that, at these events and meetings that I've had, folks from Comcast, Verizon, sitting right behind me, have been very gracious to come out and help streamline the enrollment process and make that, a 30, 40-minute application process that much easier, because, as Santi mentioned, it is a two-step process, and so anything that we can do to help our residents get enrolled and start saving them money faster, we're going to try to do that. And so very, very, very thankful for our internet provider partners over the past year. What else? And then, and so just kind of, I guess we can go to the next slide. Yeah. And so, so as you can see, that we do have like a little breakdown of where we get monthly updates about, ACP enrollment across the city from the federal government. And it's terrific because, you're able to see by zip code how many residents are currently enrolled. And if you're wondering why it only goes up through January 2023, it's mainly because by the time the providers kind of confirm folks are enrolled and receiving the benefit, it's usually, there's like a little two month delay. I don't really know, but anyway, the thing that has been tough, and one thing that we've been doing is working, to try to advocate for more granular data, just to help ourselves and help kind of tailor our efforts and find out how the best ways people are, enrolling in this particular program, whether it's through SNAP, whether it's through WIC. And, it stinks because, as Santi mentioned, we know how many folks live in public housing. We know how many folks, are enrolled in the Affordable Connectivity Program, but we can't tell how many folks living in public housing are enrolled in the ACP, which is tough. And so we really only have high-level data, but, we're trying to do whatever we can to kind of increase enrollment and, more money and more human power in providing that human approach and really, taking the time to work with residents, getting to know them is something that, we're going to continue to do. And that's something that I truly do enjoy is, spending time on the phone. If I have to, take a half hour and work up like a conference call with a resident and internet service provider, I'm more than happy to do it. And I love doing that. Just sitting down with someone, getting to know them first and foremost before we start going through this program with them, and just kind of really meet people where they are and bring City Hall, as Mayor Wu always talks about, bringing City Hall to the community. And so, we look forward to more work. There's more work to be done, and we hope to get as many folks enrolled in this program as we possibly can.
And it probably makes sense. I think Emilio has to leave a little bit early. If I think the next slide is on the work that we're doing around improving connectivity in affordable housing units. Emilio, do you wanna tell us a little bit about the experience in Urban Edge and the exciting pilot in Columbus Street?
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone. And as stated earlier, my name is Emilio Dorsley, and I'm the CEO of Urban Edge, a nonprofit organization located in Roxbury. We own more than 1,400 affordable rental homes. Most of them are concentrated in the census tracts and neighborhoods that you just heard when we reviewed the report. But we're especially going to talk a little bit more about the corridor that connects Jackson and Eggleston Square that we're calling the Columbus Corridor, because that's where we've targeted some of the work around trying to close the digital equity gap. So the work that we began to do around the digital divide really came to the forefront, with COVID, and kids were remote learning. So we partnered with the Eggleston YMCA to create a learning lab so that young people could do remote learning in a supportive environment, where we had about 10 young people a day who attended school at Eggleston because they were not able to get sufficient connectivity at home. So when the pandemic hit, it really highlighted the need for us to go a little bit deeper. And although some of our newer buildings, we were able to have them wired for fiber and use wireless routers to provide free internet service for the residents in that particular building. But in some instances, what we found was that the signals were not strong enough, especially when families had many people online at the same time. So in order to make sure that we can have families able to log on, and our end game wasn't just about making sure people were connected, it was really what was spoken about before, that the ability to connect actually make sure that residents can access new job opportunities, educational opportunities, and meet their healthcare needs. So with that in mind, we started working with Tech Goes Home and trained our staff on their curriculum, and our team delivered the curriculum to elders who lived in our affordable housing properties so that they can get connected, and also providing them with a device and then train them on how to use the device. As you know, Tech Goes Home has been a really model program and provides individuals who complete the training with a new Chromebook. One of the things that we did is that we took an additional step by pairing each elder with a nearby young person who was also trained, so that if the elders got stuck and needed some support using their devices, that there was someone nearby that could help and support them. So during that same time, we were able to meet with MAPC, who has been doing a lot of digital work throughout the state. And so we reached out to them because we wanted to get a better understanding of what the actual digital needs in our target communities were. In many ways, some of the things that were talked about in the city's report, we were able to do similar things, but on a much more targeted and focused around that area between Eggleston and Jackson Square. But, before we actually, have Will Pfeiffer talk a little bit more about the outcomes and results of the report and some of the next stages, I really want to touch a couple of the goals. Part of it was really about community engagement. I think is something that's so important. When we started this idea of trying to, find out what were the needs of the community around connectivity, and how could we actually begin to propose some ideas of how to address that, we knew it was important to establish a group of stakeholders. Residents, neighborhood agencies, Boston Main Streets, IT experts, the BHA, and other thought leaders to help us gather the info, but also to get their feedback. Because I think it was said earlier that this is not just about a technology problem. It's about really understanding and engaging community in a way so that they're part of the solution, and whatever is built with their input in mind. So we also had organizations like JVS, Youth Build, and RCC, because we understood the connectivity issue is something that goes across multiple disciplines and multiple areas that are important to many, many people. For instance, when you think about JVS, you think about, well, gosh, how are people able to apply for jobs? Are they able to, do trainings remotely? And this is mostly during, COVID. And obviously, we all know people use their mobile phones, but we're still not at a stage where all websites and all operations are functional via a mobile phone. And then we still know that there are some neighborhoods. I hear my staff all the time who live in Dorchester talk about how sometimes, their ability to even use their mobile phones can be somewhat challenging. So when we did when we completed the report with MAPC, we really learned a lot and really just reinforced what you heard earlier, where a significant number of individuals said that they were not connected to the internet at all. We found that, in particular, seniors said that they were not connected, and the number one reason really revolved around cost, where people felt that there wasn't too many affordable options. Now, the ACP is definitely one option, and that's something that, as an organization, that we're committed to trying to get more people signed up. But the challenge, as may have been said earlier, is that it is an onerous process, and it does require sometimes for people to receive a lot of help in order for them to be able to complete the entire process. But it's still something that we think is important and something that we support because it takes many, many pieces in order to make sure that we're going to solve this problem. So as we went through the report and we were able to do a survey of over 200 residents, as I said, it only reinforced the importance and the lack of connectivity that was happening in some neighborhoods, especially low to moderate income neighborhoods. And so what we want to do moving forward is really be able to figure out a method where we can connect some of our existing buildings. Some of them are 50, 60, 70-year-old buildings. And to be able to make sure that not only does the fiber optics connects to the building, but how do we ensure that the individual units have the broadband capacity to make sure that multiple people in one household can be able to be on the internet at the same time and allow for families to really engage in the society that we live in today. And there's a lot more detail that, I don't want to, go in because I think Will is going to be talking about where he'll provide an update on what we learned during the report and how we're using it to help shape the direction we're going to be moving forward in.
Yeah, and this is a picture from a visit, and this is how you know that the community aspect that we emphasize, you can't fake it. This is a picture from about a year ago where a lot of the people that are here were working together on a visit to the project that Amelia mentioned. So it's really, really cool. A few weeks before I joined the city too, so. Joel, do you want to share a little bit about the work that you've been doing with BHA on rewiring and working with the residents?
Absolutely. Thank you, members of the council, Chair Bach, and to our partners, both the city and in our nonprofits and community development partners, regional planner, and many more. Joel Wool, I'm the Chief of Staff at the BHA. BHA has been working on digital equity issues for quite a while. And specifically, I will thank my colleague Lydia Agro, who has been, I think, a long-time public employee working with people like Mike Lynch, who we are losing from the city service, right, on issues like this, as well as with private partners and trying to expand internet access. When the pandemic struck, Administrator Kate Bennett really set a direction about not just doing things to protect health and safety, but also really using every bit of federal, state, and local resources possible to truly reach and serve BHA residents. So that included initiatives on, things like food access, which are not typical for us, or had not been, but also redoubling the efforts on digital equity. As you heard, this included wiring 17 federal sites, and for clarity, that's the city bringing BONET so it can come to that property, but then even to get it into community spaces, BHA has to do a substantial amount or procure a substantial amount of wiring work. So we were able to do that at 17 sites. There's some between the CARES Act and ARPA funds, as well as a state earmark that we thank former Rep. El Lugardo and Senator Collins for. We have some additional resources to start doing a few of the state's properties as well into that sort of community Wi-Fi that is not in unit, but it is in your home, right? So it is beginning to bridge there. And in addition to sort of like a meeting room space, one of the things we've been doing is working with the resident task forces and local tenant organizations. And so whether that's served through a BONET or whether it had a community benefit provided by an ISP, we've been working to make sure that all residents could access in public spaces, and then through the sort of the elected resident bodies had improved access so that they could meet with each other, could meet with the BHA, could meet with other folks, and could do other sort of resident business, if you will. And we're empowered to do so with a mix of internet service, the space, and the devices. Between the city, BHA, and the Boston Public Library, we have distributed several thousand devices. BHA, of its own accord, did, I think, about 500. We'll get to just shy of 700 based on what we've currently ordered. And I want to note also that we have, during the pandemic, done a lot to digitalize processes that were paper, which is both making it more efficient, while we'll leave paper as an option for people who are not digitally literate or don't have that access, but some of the particular processes around, I think, customer service and admissions are vastly improved because of how we've been able to organize data and user interface. So that combined with the internet access for residents, devices, and digital literacy efforts, I think is together making both the agency work better and the population that we house and serve have substantially better outcomes with regards to digital equity. We've been engaging in both device distribution at BHA sites as well as digital literacy classes. I want to talk a little bit about the classes for a moment because you sort of wonder like how are we going to measure, how would we know like what's the impact of this? I mean, we can say how many people took a class or how many classes were offered, but what does it mean? But so, we had one example the other day where a woman called and she had tried to take a course at BPL, which was a wonderful course, and she had some combination, I think, of mobility and parking issues, was no longer able to take it. She got sick and couldn't take a different course that she wanted to, but on the third try, she was able to go in through a course that BHA and its partners were offering and had started getting internet access that way. And I just think the way that we persistently offer services, especially for seniors, especially for I think groups that we believe statistically may have lower internet access rates. When BHA surveyed, we did the survey, the resident survey that we did a couple years ago. So I think 2020 or 2021 did suggest that Spanish-speaking populations had a lower internet rate, similar, and seniors broadly within our population. So I don't think we had statistically significant information on other demographic groups, but that to me says that the efforts around seniors and senior housing, especially where we have targeted aging senior access point resident services, makes a ton of sense to continue that, to redouble that. I think we have a lot of translation interpretation services that are in-house in addition to what the city and partners provide, but I think that continuing to offer these resources in multiple forms and languages is really important, and perhaps expanding in that area. I think there's certainly other pieces we can do with the physical buildings. I do think we need to get to the community access in every building, and we need to kind of explore with the city, and it's more detailed and really hone in on what we can do with regards to diversifying what we could help residents access in unit. The sign-up process for ACP, so ACP is a significant and wonderful resource. The sign-up process is burdensome. It would certainly be helpful if there was some way of synchronizing, even by address match, who's not being served, so we could target that. BHA we don't have any data whatsoever on that kind of thing, other than how many people maybe we reached at a given event. So that is a significant challenge, and I hope that we can make some progress. And that I think is a mix of creative partnerships and then maybe the ISPs and maybe the FCC being a little more open about how people enroll. I think that is actually most of what I would want to touch upon. I would say that, we have a core mission, and this is certainly part of it. Is becoming part of it, but we're doing this on top of everything else. We have a very, very limited resident services staff. We hope that as we get agencies taking on positions like digital navigators, we're hoping we can sort of use that funding to catalyze a little bit just how much face-to-face contact we get with residents if we're able to staff up at all through some of these outside funding sources or resident services. Then we'll not just be offering more internet access, but we're going to have more touch points with people, and we end up just getting more. We're a better agency for it when we can do that, and we have very limited funding streams to offer resident services. So it's something that we are thinking about how to use for this purpose, but also creatively, anything we can access there is going to benefit folks tremendously. So that's, I think, all I have.
Great. Do you mind sharing the next slide?
Ethan, can we get to the next slide? There we go.
Sorry, that was an image of residents that have participated in some of the digital literacy courses that Joel was referring to. Much better slide than better to see the people than to see the text. Let's go to the next slide. So just to wrap up, and again, Peter can probably answer questions around this, but we've been working for a long time with a number of community-based organizations in trying to bring the resources to the communities that need this the most, and working with Tech Goes Home, which has been a key partner of the city. They were former neighbors of Do It. They had their offices in this building and in the space of the department, and it's amazing to see how they've grown and how they've been able to prosper, and how the model, as Amelia referenced, has been helping so many residents. And this is still a key part of this strategy. And as Joel referenced, we've been working as a city and as a department on trying to broker and bring other resources to this work, and also be respectful, because we know that affordable housing is a key area and digital equity is just an aspect. And we're really grateful for their time and for their partnership in letting us be respectful, knowing that they're the cool kids, they're important, doing a lot of really important work, and they're also highlighting and elevating the digital equity work. Maybe the last slide. All right. Just wanted to synthesize and close our presentation. So foremost, we do not think that at this point a municipal broadband option is an effective solution to addressing the gaps. As we mentioned, I think that the gap is much more pinpointed, and there are strategies that allow us to reach the people that need to be reached without investing in a solution that solves the problem for people that are already getting connected. Secondly, we know that the digital divide in Boston is very correlated with some particular characteristics that are also markers of vulnerability in other ways, around health disparities, around income disparities. But obviously, it impacts people that have lower incomes, people that have disabilities or other kind of impediments that they would have in interacting with government, with the ISPs or with others. Language access, particularly Spanish, this might be language and culture, and also immigration. Age, and obviously the center of the conversation, whether you're living in income-restricted housing, seems to have a big relationship with your experience of internet and digital resources. ACP provides an unprecedented level of support and affordability. It's a great program, and it is not the only thing that we think that we should be doing. Seeing what Emilio and what Urban Edge is pioneering, and starting to think, let's not just stop at the answer of this is a hard problem. Let's keep innovating and thinking, how is it that we can bring Wi-Fi to people, and let's just say when someone moves to an affordable housing unit, let's give them the password to the Wi-Fi. And if they want to have a higher level of service, let's connect them with an ISP with affordable connectivity program. So let's create competition. Let's create a little bit more availability of options for the residents, and some low friction or no friction options. The other piece is, as you heard from our partners, a very holistic approach. How is it that we bring the devices, the training, the support, and the connectivity to people where they are? Seems to be a key part of the solution that we need to bring. And we need help. We've done a lot of work, and I think that we showed that the city's in a position that it's in because of the work that has been done. And I'm very grateful and lucky to have a mayor that has trusted me to continue to do this work, and for whom digital equity is such an important part of her vision. But we need help from everyone, and we need help from the council. Help us to continue to increase enrollment, to bring awareness, Awareness as well with some of the landlords that might be reluctant to allow other ISPs or to make sure that our residents are getting connected. Secondly, we need help in starting to advocate to make sure that this great benefit does not run out and that it gets refunded after the IIJA funding, the $14 billion that Peter referenced, runs out. And we need new strategies, new tools. We need to continue to work with the partners that we have, but we also, that's part of why we're so excited to see Urban Edge and MACP and all these groups thinking there's new ways in which we can solve this problem that has been there for a long time, and then set up the city to continue to lead. And as I told you, my goal is that we bring that number of households that are disconnected to less than 1%. And hopefully people that are not connected because they choose to, and not because they cannot afford it or because there's some other barriers.
Great. Thank you so much, Chief, and thanks for the very thorough presentation. I want to note, just for councilors' reference, that we do have a second panel, and thank you for their patience, from Tech Goes Home, who's been mentioned a bit, and then both Verizon and Comcast are going to join us on the second panel. But obviously, we need to do questions for this panel first. I also wanted to give a shout out to Glenn Williams, who's in the audience from BNN, and is tirelessly working to get information out to our communities, so related to the point of how we spread the word about ACP. We're also joined during the presentation by Councillor Ruthie Louis-Jen at large, and I mentioned we were joined by President Flynn, my co-sponsor on this, so I'm going to go to President Flynn first for his opening statement and questions, and then Councillor Mejia, my co-sponsor. I'll go through colleagues, and I'll do questions at the end myself. So, Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the panel administration team for the important work you are doing in this city. Thank you to Councilor Block, Councilor Mejia for partnering with me to sponsor this important hearing. We filed and held hearings on digital equity for the past couple of years. This is a critical issue of equity, and internet access is an essential utility for all of us. As the internet is becoming increasingly indispensable to everyday life, as evident during the pandemic, it is important that we discuss ways to make sure that residents have access to affordable internet services and digital resources. COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated the digital divide for so many of our neighbors, communities of color, immigrants, our seniors, English language learners, persons with disabilities. Unfortunately, there's a lack of affordable internet and access for many neighbors, particularly those living in affordable housing developments, subsidized housing. And I'm proud to represent probably the district with the highest number of units in subsidized housing and units in public housing. Education, business, work, and other services are now increasingly reliant on the internet, and COVID-19 pandemic showed having internet access and knowing how to use digital resources is a necessity for so many. However, some areas of Boston are still currently underserved in terms of internet access, and we still have a lack of choices in choosing an affordable and reliable internet service providers. Boston has also partnered in recent years with internet providers such as Comcast and Verizon, and they are doing and working closely with city officials. Moreover, working class families, persons with disabilities, immigrant communities, communities of color, seniors, as we mentioned, disabled veterans as well, are most likely to have issues with lack of internet access and knowledge in digital skills. We need to ensure these residents have the resources they need to use the internet and to participate in work, education, civic life. This is a civil rights issue. In the City Council, we have advocated for funding for digital equity and would like to explore the possibility of municipal broadband infrastructure. I'm looking forward to discussing how we can bring affordable and quality internet services to our residents living in subsidized housing, public housing, and how the city and internet providers can help, and they have been helping. I'm glad to partner with Councilor Bach, Councilor Mejia, and all my colleagues, and with Mayor Wu, and have this hearing ordered to talk about how we can work with city officials, internet service providers, civic organizations on expanding internet access and digital education for our residents, so everyone has the opportunity to access services and resources on the internet. This is a perfect time for the hearing. We are going into the budget process now, and if we're serious about this issue, we'll fund this in the budget. And if we're not serious about this issue, then we won't fund it in the budget. It's clear. We have a choice. We're either going to fund services and programs to provide internet access to everybody, if we think it's a civil rights issue, or if not, we just won't fund it. And that's our decision we're going to have to make today and over the next couple of weeks. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Mejia?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to my colleagues, and I will echo the sentiments of my colleague, President Flynn, that we are serious about funding this, so trust that if you know anything about the way we roll, we're going to be unapologetic about this particular issue. So I just have a few questions, and it's more, there's 5 questions. One is around the Wicked Wi-Fi hubs. I'm just curious if you could just let me know whereabouts they are and what neighborhoods. I know that a few years ago we did a hearing around that Wi-Fi was accessible in Faneuil Hall and more touristy spaces and places, but not so much in, you know, neighborhoods like, you know, outside of touristy areas. I'm curious if someone could talk to me a little bit about your community outreach and engagement processes in terms of like communicating with native speakers, and kind of how do people know that they have access to this? I know, I'm sure that there's going to be a robust conversation around language access and all that good stuff, but I'd just like to lean in a little bit more and just help me understand what your communication rollout is in the language capacity space. I'm curious about the speed of access. You know, one thing is to have access to digital internet access, but the other is the speed. Now, I know we're lucky, you get what you get and you don't get upset, but if anyone remembers AOL, I am so dating myself today. You know, it would be like forever to see that little man run, okay? So I just would like to get an understanding of the speed and the access. And then I'm just curious what the city is doing to work with universities, colleges, hospitals, and people who are doing business in the city of Boston. What role do they play in supporting the supplementing and financially, you know, supporting these efforts, particularly the hospitals and universities that are closer to BHA housing developments? I'd love to know what type of conversations you've had with them and what their enthusiastic response has been to support the city in that. And then I'm curious about the ACP enrollment and the numbers. I'm just curious if those are unique, or those are people who have reapplied, and that's how that data has been captured. So if you could just unpack the data a little bit, that would be helpful. And that's it for now. Thank you.
So I'll address 4 of them, and I might defer to Peter for one of your questions. So the first question, the locations of Wicked Free Wi-Fi, we have a map. Actually, the current location, we have Wicked Free Wi-Fi locations throughout the city, not only in the first deployment was around the areas that were more touristy, but actually a lot of the locations are in city-owned facilities in Dorchester, Roxbury. We can share with you a map. I didn't have it on the presentation because I'll share that with you. Right now, and there's funding that was allocated for expanding Wicked Free Wi-Fi. I'll tell you kind of how we're approaching that. We are actually engaging with the Equity Cabinet, with Mariangeli's cabinet, and we ask each of the departments that are members of the Equity Cabinet, what are the locations that would be best served for those communities if they had publicly available Wi-Fi. We also engage with Shagun's cabinet in understanding what are areas where having free Wi-Fi would provide an economic, would be a plus and an advantage in his strategies. And we have about a list of about like 20 to 30 areas that we think that are good candidates. And we've also been, because this answers your question, we've also been working with some university partners that have been helping us with data in identifying where there's, and with MBTA and others, to identify areas where there's high concentrations of transit riders that are income restricted, that have limited access to digital resources. So we've been trying to make, again, instead of saying we need Wi-Fi everywhere, let's bring the Wi-Fi to the places where the people that benefit the most from them. And this summer, we used some of the ARP funding to get some test deployments, if you will. They're Wi-Fi that is backhauled by 5G. And we are going to be testing out what those deployments look like in some of these areas so that we can then commit, before we go and put the money, that we know at least are people using them in these locations and have a little bit more data. But we've been trying to bring the community engagement, the wisdom from our equity cabinet, and then leveraging these partnerships and data to figure out where we're going to expand.
I was just going to ask you about I did have a question about the Community Engagement Coalition. Just curious about how you went about identifying the members that were participating in it. How, I know you meet quarterly, but I'm just curious what lessons you've learned and how you have taken those lessons to apply them to your work.
I can jump in on this one. Yeah, so we started off with the 23 Digital Equity Fund recipients over the past few years. We felt that was a great place to start, and we also wanted to loop in folks like Urban Edge, Tech Goes Home, MAPC, Bari from Northeastern, and basically we knew that they were already doing a lot of digital equity work, and whether it be getting folks devices, getting folks equipped with digital skills training, or just in-home Wi-Fi. And so we knew that like their ties to the community were going to help us, really shape our work first and foremost. And we felt that they would just, everyone who we reached out to was very, very willing and very happy to engage with us and kind of, help us, where we should understand where we should prioritize not just our work and our efforts, but where we should spend our money, how we should spend our money, and just kind of keeping them updated as to what we're doing throughout the year, just kind of get their feedback on that. And it's been very fruitful. Like honestly, like we make sure that when we go for the past couple of meetings that we had, not only do we just like present like information on our end, we kind of engage with the stakeholders and kind of ask them, what, aside from, I know I'm kind of being a little redundant, I'm saying like, we already, what can we do more of, or what should we focus on? We also ask them who else we should engage with, who should we include in this group, and so we just get recommendations from them in that regard as well, and just kind of helping us form a mission, and just kind of understanding what we're all committed to doing this work. We know that there's no one size fits all approach, and so we just want to get as many different opinions, as many different viewpoints, or what else? What's the word? It's like priorities. We want to make sure that we're covering all the bases and not leaving anyone out, keeping folks who are most severely impacted by the digital divide in the conversation day to day, and just continue doing stuff like that.
And if I can supplement a little, as Peter mentioned, we've had 2 meetings. We had so many participants that we had to split the meeting in 2. The organizations include advocacy organizations for the people in the disability community, immigrant community, but we could get you a list of the actual participants. And if you know people that would be interested in individuals or organizations, let us know. Some of the key findings that we've heard, people are experiencing still issues, and again, like the issue is complex the way that so that's been validating. There's a desire to have more diversity in the kinds of devices. So we've started to identify, I said that we bring not only Chromebooks, but there's some people that want other kinds of devices to be able to do video production and other kinds of things. That, again, correlating that a lot of the difficulty in accessing ACP is related with the difficulty in language skills and whatnot, being able to, the call centers that help you enroll don't support all languages that are spoken within the city and whatnot. So I just wanted to be concrete in terms of some of the things that they have told us that we needed to do better. But they also were grateful that we're convening and that there's a lot of good work that's happened.
Great, thank you.
And do you mind if in regard to ACP outreach, I know that was another point that you asked about it. So we have a dedicated affordable connectivity program webpage on boston.gov with information available in 12 plus languages, including an American Sign Language video. We have also put that information into one-pagers that I'll always bring with me to any event that I go to. I've tried to get that out to community Boston BCYF centers, BHA buildings, like I said, family liaisons through Boston Public Schools, and just kind of elevate that however we can. I just want to shout out Charlene in the crowd who has helped utilize social media to help spread the word about ACP for us. And we make sure that we don't just focus on internet accessibility and enrollment, and we also on our broadband and digital equity page, we make sure that we do have digital literacy, digital skills resources for folks to tap into. Additionally, tips to help make Wi-Fi faster, as well as just ways you can test the internet speeds, things of that nature. But we really try to be as creative as possible with our marketing in different languages and connecting with folks who, whether they're religious organizations or community specific community groups, stuff like that. So.
Thank you. I see the gavel, and I see the gavel, Councilor Bach. Just want you to know. But thank you for your responses, and I'll just hang tight for the rest of if there's any second round. I do have a 12:15 hard stop, so hopefully I can be here for the community panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Braden?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for a really thorough, comprehensive report and presentation. I'm looking at the map and thinking, just the distribution of folks that have taken up the program. The barriers to, I think we've had this conversation before, Joel, about resident services provider in our BHA housing. I think it's a gap. That in an ideal world we would have resident service providers in all of our BHA housing, but that's not what we have at the moment. What's the best way to reach those folks who really need this service, but we are just not able to sign up? And also, I'm curious about how the two-step process for signing up, is there any way we can simplify it and make it less onerous? I think it's really just sort of connecting those sort of bridges that we can build with the folks who need the service and how we need to get them there. It's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, I can touch upon the sign-up aspect. And so it is, I try, at least on mine, whenever I work with the residents, I try to make it as seamless as possible. And as mentioned earlier, with help from all the ISPs in Boston, they've been very willing to send out volunteers. And basically, so there are two ways you can apply, and I'll touch upon the ISP's aspect of it in a second. But you can either apply online, and one caveat is that you just need an email address. That's the quickest way to do it, is online. It takes a few minutes. You might have to upload supporting documents, but within minutes you hear back about whether you're approved or not. You just enter your basic contact info, click check off how you qualify, and things like that. You can also do the same exact thing just by mail, and you print out an application And that just takes, because it's snail mail, it could take anywhere 2-3 weeks for the application to arrive, and then another couple of weeks for it to get back to you. I think it has to go out to somewhere in Kentucky. So, what because of that, multifaceted, that's, on one hand, you have to go through the application process, get approved. You get an application ID number. It's about 11 digits long. It's like your golden ticket. You save that, and then you contact whoever your internet provider is, whether it's mobile internet, in-home internet. Even if you don't have internet set up yet, you can still apply for this program and then contact an internet provider. But we found that the large gap was like, oh, people are getting approved, and then thinking that like, oh, the discount's automatically on my bill because of that one thing. And what we try to make sure people know is like, no, that's the first step. The second step is then contacting a provider, sharing that golden ticket, ACP ID number with the provider, having them confirm everything on their end, applying the discount to their bill, to your bill, and within the next billing cycle, you should see the discount. So it's like getting approved by the federal government, then getting approved by the internet provider, because it takes people sometimes 20 minutes just to talk to a representative on the phone. Folks from Verizon, Comcast, RCN, Astound have been very gracious in coming out to community events with me, whether we're at BHA Community Days or community centers, and they'll set up their own table. I'll work with a resident and get them approved, and then they'll go off to whoever their provider is or whoever they want their provider to be. Yeah. And so taking that potentially several day process to ideally, half hour max.
I'm starting to understand why our seniors and our folks who don't, English is not their first language, is a barrier to, and also the folks who aren't digital natives. I think you need having the younger, more digital savvy person help support. The other question I had is, looking at maps, one thing I've heard is when we look at digital access, if you compare urban areas with rural areas, that, just because there's digital access in a building doesn't mean everybody in the building gets access. It's one of those things that what are the limitations in just mapping where service is easily accessible? Like, is that a challenge?
Yes, so
especially in big multifamily buildings.
Yeah, so the FCC launched, we didn't include that in the presentation, this getting long, but the FCC launched an initiative for mapping broadband, and it actually, that data is part of what the federal government's going to use in the funding allocation for the next round of programs. And to your point, we did not have, in general, as a country, very good data around who had service at the unit level. When the FCC published that first round of data, our analytics team actually crossed the data with the addresses that we have, and we found that about 25,000 units were missing, particularly multifamily dwelling units. Mm-hmm. So we challenged the results. There's this kind of collaborative and interestingly contentious process. And another thing that we need residents to do is to verify that their address is accurate in the FCC website, which they can report directly. But if they then confirm with the city, we have the ability of supporting the challenge. We spend a fair amount of time looking at the data and then looking at how the government is responding to the challenges. And that shows a little bit of the patterns that we mentioned, that there's gaps, there's some inconsistencies, but generally it's not, that's partially what supports the recommendation of not doing the municipal broadband at this point. Most people are connected. It's not very straightforward where, like, even that particular area of the city, if they're not getting broadband connectivity. But mapping and having better quality data is a challenge, and it's one where we're leveraging our analytics team's resources to be helping, and similar to the census data issues, making sure that that the people that need to be counted, that everybody's getting counted, and that we're holding all of us accountable for the connectivity in those units.
Because if we don't measure it, we don't know how far, we don't know how big the hole is.
Mm-hmm.
Counselor, and I just wanted to say, I think hopefully with the ongoing collaboration, we'll get more detailed knowledge on sort of service quality and experience too, as we continue to do resident surveying on different issues, but with the Do It partnerships, I think we can continue to think about, like, is it meeting your needs, right? This is like the pandemic, you know, and multiple users at home at the same time kind of experience sort of, I think, brought to light a lot of, you know, does the device meet your needs? What else are you looking for in terms of technology? And I just want to go back to your prior question really quick, because I'm going to have to absent myself in a moment to get to some of a resident meeting in South Boston. But I think in terms of, well, we're successfully reaching people, I think, through in-person events and through where we have sustained in-person contact, and primarily that is the sustained resident services are at our elderly sites because we have ASAPs working there, right? And they have multiple layers of services they provide, so they're known people. On the family sites, it's very sporadic. Some of them, like I'm thinking about like Archdale and Rosendale is right next to a BCOF center, right? So as you know, that it's very different at every different family site.
Yeah.
So we might have a partner that has, it's like almost like a catchment for like people, a place where people go, right? That's right there where there's like a place to integrate services of some kind or outreach. We might have nothing like that. There might be a task force at their site that's active. There might not be one. So it is very contextual in terms of what I think outreach mechanisms exist. But I think if we need to like continue to look, and if there's another agency partnership or nonprofit partnership, we should probably, we'll continue to explore those.
And I'll just add briefly, because in terms of the quality of the service, this is where we can see where there's availability, but the wiring, the age of the wiring might be a factor. The age of the router might be a factor. So again, like it's not just what pieces are the responsibility of the internet service provider. And Emilio alluded this in his presentation. During the pandemic, it's almost as if every resident in Boston took their car out at the same time. It was an unprecedented strain on the infrastructure, and I think like the ISPs responded almost heroically, like thinking about the way that we operate our network here. Even the city of Boston, we had to make these massive adjustments in the infrastructure to be able to accommodate every student using Zoom at the same time.
Yeah.
So there's been some strains and some performance issues that I think that we've been working through, and investments that are part of the budget, that will be part of the budget as we harden some of those investments in infrastructure in the city.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. Councillor Flaherty?
And I had the opportunity to just peruse through the document, the 100-plus page report, and through the chair, if the chair does not have a copy of it, if we can get a copy for my colleagues. And one thing I wanted to sort of dial in on as I was listening to Council President Flynn's comments, and come at it as someone that was born in public housing, and I had seen the report, and the report indicates that lower income areas have the same access, the same high speed internet access as everybody else. So is that accurate? Are there, and if so, I mean, I just want to know which parts of the city does the high speed exist and which parts don't. I read the report. The report indicates that lower income areas do have the same access, but in listening to some of the questions from my colleagues, I'm kind of getting a little bit of a different picture. So, and if that's the case, if we can just briefly maybe go through the map together and walk through the map and sort of show me where the gigabit speeds are and where they're not. But reading that report, if it's accurate, we're in good shape. And your synopsis of the report talking about Boston does not have lack of a broadband infrastructure, that Boston is the exception among cities our size or larger. That's all the good news. But if we can go through the map, if there's spots that don't exist, then that's the crux of the issue.
Yes, it's a great question, because it goes to this interesting contradiction. We know that there's people that are struggling. We hear from them getting connected and the quality of the service, but at the same time, we have heard from Comcast and Verizon about the quality of the service, and based on our knowledge of how they're provisioned their network, we believe, how do we make these two things that seem incompatible be true at the same time? And that is where we feel that there's a couple of potential culprits. The first one, the wiring in the buildings, particularly in some of the older buildings. So you might get high quality connectivity into the building, but once it gets into the building, getting it distributed to the units, that's where there's a loss of performance. Or it might be the kind of routers that they're using. I'm a huge nerd, but even my router, I was checking the other day, I'm not able to use my internet at home at the speed that I pay for because I don't have a newer router. Like my router's from 2015, so. And if you're income restricted, those investments in keeping even that little bit of infrastructure can be quite daunting. So we think that there's a lot, that's where some of the gaps are happening, and that's why the investment in broadband, which is basically from the internet, the internet's a physical thing, is bringing it from the data centers where these carriers have like their hubs, through the streets to the buildings. That's broadband. That's where all the data that we have shows it is true. It is available in Boston. You could request it, even if you don't have service at home, you could request it from almost any of them. By law, if you're within an area that is nearby the signal and you request it, they'll deliver it to you. And again, once you start working in the multi-dwelling units, it gets also challenging because for some of the units, you also need, the landlord needs to provide access. So that's also where there might be restrictions in competition. So Comcast might be in the building, but Verizon is not, or one or the other is not. And then you have to get the building owner to agree. So that's where we think that the contradiction exists and both things are true.
So in the very beginning, Chief, in my opening, we talked about we have the service. Sometimes it's just we're not talking to one another, right? So we know that we have high-speed internet and gigabit service across the city, including low-income areas. In some instances, there's some maybe tricky spots, if you will, in whether we're not collaborating or communicating or informing our partners. So I guess the question I have now is why not include the ISPs on the community coalition? Makes sense, right? They're doing it. They're our partners. They've all got community relations and government affairs folks. Why don't we include them as part of that community coalition so that we could identify those spots that you're talking about, and they're in the room when we're identifying the spot? Problem solved, I would argue.
Yeah, look, this is the beginning. We just had the first round of meetings, and we did consider, and we have a very good relationship. Hopefully they feel the same way, but I think we have a very good relationship with Comcast, with Verizon, with AT&T, and with others. The thought about not including them in the first space is just to give the community a little bit of room to feel comfortable opening up, but we think that there might be an opportunity of getting people to talk to each other, and nothing better than to have us all be accountable to one another. So it's a great idea, and we look forward to figuring out how to evolve this new concept of this community technology coalition.
I mean, so the takeaways for me, obviously, today would be that we're not going to spend $1 billion trying to reinvent the wheel. It's city taxpayer funds, which is a good news because we obviously have significant, there's no lack of broadband coverage in that we're doing it as a city. We're doing it better than cities our size or bigger. So that's the good news for me. And then I'm encouraged to hear that you will include the ISPs on the coalition, because I think therein lies some of the misinformation or some of that divide that if I always subscribe to, if you can get folks in a room and order out for lunch, if you will, you can pretty much solve any problem. But if they don't know about the problem, or if there's misinformation, or it could be an education or a marketing issue, it could be an infrastructure issue, but the folks that actually have the capabilities to solving the problem, if they're outside of the room and not inside the room, we're just going to continue to chase our tail. So my strong advice would be include the ISPs in the coalition as soon as possible. I think the need for a hearing like this would probably be a moot point. So I appreciate the work you're doing, Chief. I know just coming into a lot of the stuff, as well as Peter, you've done great work too, and all the folks that are here that have done tremendous work in this space. And whether you're working here on behalf of the city and you're a partner or you're a corporate partner, appreciate the work you do. And as this study indicated, Boston, city of Boston, compared to cities its size or bigger, stuck out. Was the exception, I think is what the report said, was the exception. Everybody here should take a bow and continue to collaborate for one another. So we're in a really good position as a city because of those natural strengths that we have, but also because of the dedication of folks that are in front of us here today, looking to roll up the sleeves and work together. And if there's one piece that's missing, I think it's the ISPs need to be on that coalition and continue to collaborate and move our city forward but it's exciting to hear that Boston, compared to other cities our size or bigger, is the exception, that we seem to be doing it better than anybody else. So thank you for the work that you do, and thank you to our partners that are here as well for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. Councillor Louis-Jean?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just want to thank all the panelists for being here and for your obvious commitment to this issue, and to everyone here who's going to testify. I also want to thank my colleagues, because I think this is a powerful example of what it looks like to work on an issue collaboratively together as a council and together with the mayor's team to really pick an issue and solve it. You know, I was coming in here prepared to ask questions that I've brought up with Verizon and Comcast. You know, if we're not doing it right, should we be investing in public broadband? And I'm really encouraged to hear that we have the infrastructure in place. I think, as my at-large colleague was saying, we have the infrastructure in place, so it's really about an access issue, an issue that matters deeply to me and to everyone, as we know that internet really is a public good and can really cut you off to a lot of economic mobility and opportunity. I think I'm excited about the work, Amelia, that you all are doing at in pilot programs that we're looking into. I guess, and I apologize if I missed this, did the study cover what it would look like to have a citywide wireless option? And like, if you could talk, if I missed this, I apologize, but what would that look like to have just like a citywide wireless option?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. The study covered the concept of fiber to the property, so the idea of providing fiber connectivity directly to the home. The estimated cost of this was a high-level estimate, was about $1 billion. As the cost of the infrastructure and of the setup, there's probably other costs associated with it. That is the primary kind of concept that we assess. There's, as you mentioned, there's a couple of other options. There's people that are providing millimeter wave as backhaul. A lot of those still need fiber, so the cost is still probably around that area, the general neighborhood.
Like big.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
big, it's expensive. It probably would it wouldn't be the city itself. It's like Boston Water and Sewer. It'd be a utility that is providing customer service to, so it would be basically having to create a new utility.
Yeah.
And that is where, when we go and we look at the population that, and in some sense, the analysis for us is, if we're gonna create a public option, you'll be getting some market rate subscribers, and we would be trying to subsidize and discount the low income subscribers. Mm-hmm. So you're really having to build the infrastructure in great part for a lot of people that are not gonna need it.
Right.
And just to subsidize the people that do need it. So, and as we mentioned, there are things that we all could do that would make this easier and better. The ISPs, it would be great if they invested more money in the call centers to have lower wait times, if they have more language accessibility for the people that are requesting the service. There are things that we could help them in making it easier for them to have access to the multi-dwelling units and increase accessibility in Boston's a dense city that has a lot of buildings, and it'd be great.
Did you just say dense?
Sorry?
Did you, where did you just say? Did you just say
multi-dwelling units?
Okay.
Yeah, so, like being able, the landlords sometimes are a big obstacle for the ISP. So I think that this is where the approach is collaborative, and then trying to figure out how is it that we make these kind of contradictory pieces come together and use the data in our community to really keep us accountable at how we can advance the issue.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. And just two follow-up questions. I think my team, well, my team in
We're
some
all
way.
your team.
Yeah, my colleagues answered a lot of questions. And Amelia, if I hopefully I said Urban Edge. I feel like did I said another organization?
Yes,
Okay, good. I was like, I don't drink coffee, and I'm like, maybe I should start. The second question is just to clarify something I believe I heard is that regardless of income, if you have a child in BPS, you qualify for ACP. Okay. Yep. I'm also curious about what you hear from residents when you talk to them about access and internet. Like, when you're talking, especially to low-income residents who are having these access issues, like, what are the ways in which they come to the city with their real life experience of like not being, it does, like with not being able to access the internet or the obstacles they face. I think, you know, I know that you're not that person, but like I'd love to hear what you hear from residents about this issue.
Peter can answer. I'm just going to interject. He has a better answer than mine, but as an immigrant, as a non-native speaker, I've talked with members of the diplomatic corps, the Mexican consul, the Colombian consul, and there's fear and apprehension. Some people feel like they might not qualify for a federal subsidy because they're immigrants, and we have a high percentage of non-native population. And then even there's a lot of harm done around the fear of retribution if you access a public benefit. Mm-hmm. I remember when I was getting my green card, having to go and say that I had not received any public funding. So it's a rule of the previous administration. I think that there's a real fear of not gonna get penalized later down the road. I just wanted to add a little bit of texture there in my personal experience, but Peter talks to more people and you probably have other pieces that are missing.
And so, Chief, since you personally, I'll tell you fully where my perspective is coming from as Haitian American, grew up in Mattapan, Hyde Park, and someone, I'm a lawyer, have done direct services in housing court, and now as a city councilor. We also know that the ways in which people are accessing the internet looks different for different demographics. So folks who are used to accessing the internet on their phones, for example, who could be folks who could use it in their homes if they had. So how are we getting at the gap? Because I feel like the access, everyone has it on their phones and can do maybe some basic things, but that jump from phone to in your home, what are you hearing from that population, and how can we do a better job there?
Yep. So I have two anecdotes, or two stories. One of my, I'm probably going to give her a call after this just to let her know I shouted her out. But one of the constituent that I worked with a few months ago from Mattapan, actually, she is a grandmother, and she lives alone, but she has her grandkids over all the time who are BPS kids. And before getting hooked up with the ACP, her internet was just not affordable. She was paying for it, but just barely getting by with that. And she wanted to be able to have reliable, fast speeds for when her grandkids come over to do their homework, and if they need to use the internet, or if she wants to have email access or basic play some cute computer games, things like that. So she basically just told me how grateful she was for getting hooked up to the ACP. We went through that process together. We got her approved. We got the discount on her bill, and we talk every now and then, just kind of checking in and see how things are going. But just from her perspective, where it's now I have this resource in my home. She may have actually not even had internet prior to this, but point is, she now has reliable internet that she can afford for not just herself, but her family members whenever they come to visit. Another story is from just talking with folks who have received Digital Equity Fund money. We've seen that some of the constituents that these community-based organizations work with, there's at one point in early 2022, we asked about, we did a little check-in, a 6-month impact report, how have things been going with your projects? And one of the, I don't know the quote for, word for word, but basically, to paraphrase a quote, we heard from a constituent through this organization that was able to get internet access to their phone and connect them to very necessary telehealth resources, and folks who were suffering from the opioid epidemic. So it's not just being able to get internet access through the ACP in particular has allowed folks to also address other issues. And we know one thing that we try to remember and prioritize. We know that digital equity is and does not digital equity is and does not exist without racial equity. And so we know that any other social or societal issue that is relevant today is impacted by digital inequities. And so just hearing stories from my grandmother, or my second grandmother, I guess, And the folks who have worked with organizations who have received money to help take advantage of these programs, it's very, inspiring, and also just like, it lets us know that like, hey, this is working and this is why we need to put more money into programs like this, because, folks who are suffering from addiction now have access to, whether, to vital medical resources that they might not have had beforehand. So it's like things like that.
And
Sure.
Go ahead, Melanie.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, because we talk to a lot of our residents all the time, and, we get a variety of, of opinions. Obviously, we do have a segment of folks who are not able to access, but I want to make a distinction between having the infrastructure where underground in the street you have the fiber optics, but it's not in the building. And then, once it's in the building, the wiring that's necessary in order to give people the broadband access in their units. And I think this is where there continues to be a challenge. One, as affordable housing developers, where would the funding come to be able to do that, to take it from the street and bring it to each unit so that people can have it? And then we've tried and partnered with Comcast, and they've done, in many instances, a great job. But in some instances, given the model that we've used, it hasn't been fully successful because we were using wireless routers as a mechanism to get the internet that's in the building, and then allowing individual units where we gave them a free router. We paid for the overall service as an organization and as a property owner. But what we found was that what you really need is to actually wire each individual apartment so that people have a router that's actually connecting the devices within the unit versus having a router that's trying to bring the signal all the way from the ground floor and up. So I think that there's definitely some opportunities to really take the infrastructure that exists and extend it in a way that actually meets the needs of a lot of people.
Thank you. I can just imagine the difficulty of the wireless. I'm like, I don't know, tech is not my language, but I can just imagine how difficult like that strategy must have been. I also want to thank you, Peter, for just highlighting the racial equity aspect of this work, and just want to thank all the panelists and the chair. I will have to leave and watch the rest of this hearing, but I want to thank Verizon and Comcast for also leaning into this conversation, BNN for being here, and look forward to continuing work on this with my council colleagues who are sponsoring this. So thank you for all your work.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilor Louis-Jean. And I'll just ask some quick questions and then go to the next panel, because I'm very mindful we've been keeping them waiting for a while, but I think there's so much good information that you guys brought to the table. And I want to pick up first. I actually was wondering if Will Pfeiffer wanted to come and join the empty chair that Joel vacated, because I would love to hear a little bit more about the Urban Edge findings. And while Will's coming down, I just want to say, just picking up on Mr. Dorsley's point, that to me, what we found in this study is not that we don't have an infrastructure problem, it's that we have this different infrastructure problem. So we don't want to spend $1 billion spent building out fiber, but it's almost like a version of our water and sewer problem, where we've got an amazing water and sewer system, but then we've still got some properties that have a little lead pipe that connects, right? And so it's like, we've got great water and sewer, and we don't have our water and sewer in general running through lead, but we do have properties that have a little lead connection, and it's private, it's not public, so we're not technically as taxpayers on the hook for it, but we care about the fact that people be having lead-free water. And so, I think we've struggled with the question of how do we support the significant cost of getting rid of those connections, right? Recognizing that there's also a private share in that. And it seems to me like this is in some ways very similar. Like, again, with the kind of utility analogy where like people need to have good internet. It turns out we've actually, with our ISP partners, like really done good, like core trunk infrastructure. But then if somebody's in an old building, and I mean, one of the things we talk about a lot on the green retrofit side is the fact that like most of the buildings that exist in Boston are still gonna be here when we're trying to hit all our green targets, right? It's like 85% of them are still gonna be around in 2050. And that seems to me like very much the problem here too, because like I have a district with a lot of historic buildings that aren't going anywhere, and we don't want them to go anywhere. But it means that if their wiring's not upgraded and so everyone's getting a subpar internet, that's very frustrating. And for people who can afford market rate stuff and can afford to pay an electrician to come and rewire their house, great. But like, how are we gonna prioritize our affordable communities? So to me, I think, just to the point that Councilor Flaherty and others were raising, it's not that we don't have an infrastructure problem. It's that we have a more distributed infrastructure problem, which like is good news, bad news. It's bad news because it's on the private side, and so figuring out how we partner is going to be key. I think it's good news because having identified that, like, it's more something you can bite off in pieces than a whole kind of like trunk internet system. And then also, you know, I think there really are opportunities with some of the federal funding that's available right now, to sort of, if we can identify what are our affordable communities that need help with rewiring, you know, that's my other hat. When I'm not chairing this committee, I'm chairing the COVID Recovery Committee. And as the administration folks know, my big thing on the ARPA funds has been, how do the ARPA funds help us get other funds, right? Like, because they are eventually a non-renewed resource. So that's going to be my question for the chief in a minute, just as like, you know, what do we think? Like, I'm excited about this $700,000 to think about, you know, really doing kind of case studies of some affordable developments and what they would need to be properly wired. Can you talk a little more about that? And also, like, what's our hope? If we identify, okay, we have all these needs, what's our hope for meeting them? So that's my question to you. But before we do that, I just wanted to pivot back to Will and Mr. Dorsley and just hear a little bit more about the report that Urban Edge did.
Sure, thank you. So my name is Will Pfeffer. I'm the civic technologist at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. As Emilio mentioned, we've partnered very closely with Urban Edge and a number of other community stakeholders, first to do a sort of miniature digital equity plan. We did a report about the state of digital equity in 4 census tracts in the Columbus Ave corridor running from Eggleston Square up to Jackson Square, and the sort of connector there on Columbus. One of the big inequities that we found there, I think that as some of the other councilors had mentioned, there is pretty pervasive infrastructure. There are major affordability and quality of service issues in this neighborhood. And as I think we saw from some of the maps that Santi shared earlier, it's also it's a neighborhood that has a much higher percentage of Black and Latinx folks living there than the rest of the city, and so it's obviously a racial issue or a racial equity issue as well. So we found that in the study area that we were looking at, there were about 40% of households did not have internet access because of a lack of affordability. And then of the households that did have internet access, only about 35% reported both having access and the access they had meeting their needs. So, you know, kids could be on Zoom class, parents could be working from home, multiple connections at the same time. It was a pretty low percentage of people who had sufficient access to do what they needed to do from home. And I think that that's a really stark finding, and it really, it is pretty separate from what better served areas and higher income areas of the city are. There's also about a quarter of residents lack access to any device, and about 40% of residents say that they don't always have, or not everyone in their household has access to a device when they need one. There are some digital literacy issues as well, and you know, we've worked closely and been very impressed by the work that partners like Tech Goes Home are doing to address some of those literacy and device access issues. So I'll speak a little bit to the project specifically that we're embarking on with Urban Edge. This is, or hopefully will be funded through a grant from the Massachusetts Broadband Institute, which is the same program that Peter mentioned that they had applied for. And essentially we're using federal money, or we haven't been approved for the grant yet, so we're hoping to use federal money to build networks within about 50 of Urban Edge's buildings that accounts for about 800 or 900 units of housing up and down Columbus Ave that will provide high-speed internet in everyone's unit at no cost to residents. The federal funding will pay for the procurement of the actual hardware and the infrastructure that has to go into buildings to make sure we have modern, up-to-date wiring, that we have access points in all of these buildings, and it'll also pay for the first year of service. And then after that first year, Urban Edge will take over the operating expenses for the more long-term operation. We've also done similar projects in partnerships with municipal governments and housing authorities in Revere, Chelsea, and Quincy. And as part of this grant, we're hoping to expand that around the Commonwealth, not just in Greater Boston. But we think that this is a really good way that we can take that targeted approach and provide direct service to people who are not being served for a variety of reasons, and make sure that they are able to get online. Yeah, I think that sort of covers it. I'm happy to answer any more specific questions, but that's a high-level overview of it.
No, that's fantastic. And yeah, we've definitely got our fingers crossed for the federal funding on that front, both your thing and our thing. And yeah, no, that's great. But I think it really highlights, right? I mean, the reality is the numbers that you were describing for the catchment area that Urban Edge is looking at are different from these citywide numbers, right? And it just reminds us that there continues to be, if not as much concentrations of need in terms of whether fiber's running in the street outside, definitely concentrations of need in terms of the other barriers that we've been discussing today, right? The wiring, the ability to sign up for ACP. I'll preview my questions for the ISPs. Like, I mean, Joel mentioned it, but we should be able to do data match. Like, we should be, like, we know all the names and addresses of everybody who lives in BHA housing and they qualify. We know all the names and addresses of everybody who's got a kid in BPS and they qualify. The idea that we can't do some kind of serious syncing up that tells us, you know, it is a huge benefit to the city that we, and to the state, that now there's really detailed data on the SNAP gap. And it has allowed us in the last few years to significantly close it. This is the gap between people who are signed up for Mass Health and people who are signed up for SNAP, even though the same people qualify for them all, right? We've made huge progress on that just in the last few years, and it's mainly through a different form of data, like cross-checking, right? And so it seems to me like there's some obvious moves to be made there. So that's my preview for the next panel. But I just think, yeah, I just think those numbers really highlight that there are different places that need a kind of different focus. Chief Garces, do you mind speaking to the point about sort of what's next on infrastructure?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that there's a couple of ways in which we think about the question that you mentioned about how do we leverage our dollars, how do we make these recurring resources. So there's a couple of strategies that we've used. The first one is looking, that's why there's been such a heavy focus on ACP enrollment, and we're grateful for the council leading in providing the funding to take those home for ACP enrollment and all the work that we've done collectively, because that is one way in which every dollar to get a household enrolled, and hopefully if they keep re-enrolling, means that the federal government covers the internet bill, which is also probably nice for the ISPs as well, making sure that they have a consistent revenue and not dealing with late payments and all this stuff. The second piece is we know that there are gaps in what the funding that was provided and the way that the Infrastructure and Jobs Act looked at digital equity. It applied more for rural areas than it did for urban areas, because we know that our issues rely on a lot of other parts of the infrastructure stack that did not receive funding. So one way in which we want our dollars to go a long way, and why we're willing to use city dollars to kind of fund some of these assessments, is we want to know what the size of the gap is, and then start advocating to the federal government and to the state. And operating affordable housing units is difficult for BHA and for the CDCs and the other partners. So in some sense, we need to figure out the development of wiring standards around conduit, around like how the buildings are wired. That matters. So anyways, I think that there's like, how do we leverage the resources to understand what the next piece of the puzzle is, and then working together. One, because it aligns with some of the questions that we've been asked before. There's also increasingly an interest from the private sector, and we got the Massachusetts Competitive Partnership was actually one of the first groups that I met when I started at the city. And our key employers in the region know that this is an issue. It's an issue that impacts, because of the benefits in workforce development, telehealth, and to Peter's point and to the councilor's other point, there's a number of jobs that are now remote or hybrid. And if you don't have good internet at home, it means that you will have a hard time participating in some of these white collar jobs and in some of these like very stable, good paying jobs. So anyways, I think that there's a good business case here there's a return on investment on solving this issue, and if we align the incentives correctly, we can get the revenues to keep putting funding to address the issue. And some of the issues around wirings are issues that impact the ISPs as well. They want to have a good reputation. They don't want people that have a bad experience. So to the extent that we're able to leverage the resources to make sure that we're addressing those issues, I think that there's a good intersection of where the problem meets all of our needs, and we can make a case to get the resources to continue to be leveraged.
No,
Sure,
that's-
I have to apologize. I have to
Oh,
leave,
yeah.
but I'm sure Michael Rousseau from my team will be able to answer any additional questions for Urban Edge.
No, great, thank you so much, Mr. Dorsley. Yes, and we're actually just about to, that was really my last question for the chief, so I think we're gonna dismiss this panel. I guess my very last question for the chief is just, so I know that obviously our City of Boston licensing agreements around BONET mean that we can't offer a paid service where we're charging people and sort of be a competitor. But it is my understanding that we have fairly wide latitude to provide free service, like in the service of the public interest.
It is, again, and we consulted more closely with our legal department to make sure that we're on the right side of the agreement, but that interpretation is partially why we've expanded BONET to BHA, and BHA is part of the city in our eyes. And we're actually working with the ISPs as well to start doing the expansion. An agreement with Verizon is what's going to allow us to expand our free Wi-Fi in the public area. So, and again, I think that that's also supplementary for them with some of their customers that might not have data throughout the entirety of the month that run out of data. So we'll continue to work together to, one, and as we renew the franchise agreements, to make sure that those services continue to be free for the city, the BONET resources, because they're essential for our operations, and they're key in our strategy to address this issue.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you all, and let me now invite down our next panel. I've got, one second. Marvin Benet, our Chief Advocacy Officer from Tech Goes Home, which we have mentioned before, and we're all very, very fond of and proud of, and has received some dedicated American Rescue Plan funds in addition to the PEG funds. Stephanie Lee, the Director of State and Local Government Affairs for Verizon, New England Central, and then Angela Holm, the Director of Government Regulatory Affairs for Comcast. I'll also invite David Talbot, just if you are still here and want to join the panel, just because we didn't hear from you directly as much, and I would love to have that opportunity. So. And sorry, David is joining us. He's the Director of Research Services from CTC Technology and Energy. I know that we talked a bunch about the report, and you're sort of here as the backup on the report, but just if there is anything. Peter, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Glenn Williams and BNN for helping fund the CTC report. So I just want to make sure that we just give credit where credit was due, and the report would not have been possible without the help from BNN. So thank you very much.
Amazing. And while we're getting everybody up, Glenn, do you want to come to the mic and say a few words?
Sure.
Just maybe that standing one right there.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that.
Just speak right into that.
Thank you very much, Counselor. I appreciate the invitation. My name is Glenn Williams. I'm the General Manager of Boston Neighborhood Network. And funding that report was something that we found absolutely necessary, we needed to do. You know, we're the ones that produce the programming. We put it out there for people to share. The transparency of this very room is so crucial and vital. But the experience that we got as far as the digital issue is we were covering the St. Patrick's Day breakfast, where a lot of the people in this room were there speaking and stuff. And on Monday morning when I got there was people telling me about this little circle that came up. And it was devastating to me because one of our city councilors might have been talking at the time. They weren't, it was me I'm the one that got the circle. But that kind of thing shouldn't be happening. I shouldn't be getting a call from somebody's house that wants to tell me that I missed out on something very important. And the other thing is, it's been said a couple of times, but I think it's important for me to say as well, and that is that when the pandemic hit, we sent all the kids home with Chromebooks. They couldn't do their homework. And if Uncle Charlie answered his cell phone in the other room, they not only got the circle, but they got booted out completely. So we started producing programming for them. It's vital, it's important. We wouldn't have backed up the study unless we felt it was, it's not a luxury anymore. I think you've put it perfectly, Councilor. It's not a luxury, it's an essential. Okay? Thank you very much.
Absolutely, and those public access programs you provide are so important, and they're just another example of, it's one of the reasons that, to me, I'm very encouraged, and, this might be also something the ISPs are able to mention, but, there has been an increase recently in the minimum standards for upload, download speed for these more affordable plans, and to me, that's really important because of my focus on we can't have 2 tracks, and part of that is because there's so much information that people need access to that's like higher data levels now, and so services that used to sound fine don't sort of sound fine anymore. I want to go to this panel. I want to really thank you guys for your patience. I'm sorry, the council, we are always at war with our strong desire to hear from everybody and our strong desire to ask lots of questions and pontificate, so I appreciate your patience. I'll go first to Marvin Vinay, the Chief Advocacy Officer from Tech Goes Home.
Good morning, everyone. Well, afternoon at this stage.
Indeed, sorry.
My name is Marvin Vinay, Chief Advocacy Officer, as has been mentioned, of Tech Goes Home. We're a leading Boston-based nonprofit that has been working for more than 2 decades to advance digital equity by providing reliable internet devices, culturally responsive digital skills training, and so forth. I want to start by thanking Councilor Bach, Councilor Brereton, Flynn, Mejia, Lujian as well, for your support continuously and your efforts to really make this digital equity a promising solution for the residents of the City of Boston. The Digital Equity Assessment commissioned by the City of Boston and released last year found that while the availability of broadband internet expanded over the past decade, it still remains out of reach for many Bostonians. Even among those with access to both broadband and a computer, many still struggle to use those tools effectively. This means that tens of thousands remain disconnected due to struggles with affordability, navigating complex cost program enrollment processes, accessing usable devices, and a lack of relevant, accessible training and support. These Bostonians residents remain unable to access the digital world, to search for and utilize essential services, participate in telehealth, submit job applications, complete homework assignments, and connect with loved ones, just to name a few. Barriers to digital inclusion, including broadband access, are compounded for low-income residents, and particularly those living in affordable housing. Adoption and affordability remain key concerns, and as the digital equity assessment highlights, a lack of broadband connectivity exacerbates the systemic socioeconomic challenges many residents are already facing. Currently, there are few incentives for internet service providers or property owners to make investments in broadband and public housing. For the internet providers, they see little profitability and are under no policy or mandate requiring them to develop affordable access in these units, whereas owners of affordable housing developments may lack the time, resources, or tools to implement important broadband improvements and are often unaware of the broader effects of digital equity on residents. To help communities overcome persistent barriers to access, TGH has leveraged both public and private support, including the American Rescue Plan funded, allocated by this council, to provide affordable internet devices, skills training to sustainably expand digital equity throughout our communities. We work with community-based organizations in Boston and across Massachusetts, including several affordable housing developments, to identify Tech Goes Home instructors and then support those trusted community leaders as they provide TGH programming to learners to help identify and recruit. Our comprehensive community-based approach allows our learners to confidently participate in the digital world. We've graduated nearly 40,000 individuals in the past decade. We've seen that digital inclusion leads to opportunities of workforce development, career advancement, economic mobility, and 74% of our adult learners use these skills to gain with TGH to access job searching resources. And in the past 5 years, more than 3,000 of our graduates found new jobs and more than 2,000 earned pay raises in the year after their course. The results of TGH programming in Boston and across Commonwealth prove that participation and in advancement through digital world is possible, giving the necessary tools and support, but is predicated on access, especially for residents, like folks living in affordable housing who face compounded barriers to connectivity, while Tech Goes Home is able to support access in the short term by providing a digital device and up to a year of internet at no cost, utilizing hotspots where broadband isn't available. Greater investment is necessary to ensure that all residents can and stay online. We urge the City Council and the Mayor and the state and federal leaders to prioritize long-term improvements to digital infrastructure and invest in personalized support and training as an important supplement to the significant investment in the city and state are making to expand affordable housing and strengthen our economy. I'd like to thank the council, Mayor Wu, and the city for your attention to this matter, and we really would like to be a supporter of all the work that you are doing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Marvin, and thank you for all the work that you and Tech Goes Home are doing. Next, I'll go to Stephanie Lee
Great,
from
thank
Verizon.
you. It's a pleasure to be here, councilors. We appreciate the opportunity to talk about digital equity and the work that Verizon's doing within the city of Boston. You know, over many years, the leadership of the city of Boston has really been focused on this issue, and that is the reason the city of Boston is further ahead than other cities. Just having that vision is really why we're all sitting here today, continuing to try to iterate how we can best bridge this digital divide. Since 2019, Verizon has been investing more than $600 million to deploy fiber for Fios and 5G services to provide Boston residents in every neighborhood with more broadband options. Since the digital equity report, I'm pleased to say that the last neighborhoods, including Beacon Hill, downtown, and the financial district, now have fiber that run down every single street. So Boston has fiber everywhere. That was the goal 7 years ago, and it's true. We did start in the neighborhoods. We were very intentional about an equitable build and then moved towards the core of the city. As part of our work, however, we do need to continue to get into, we've spent some time talking about those apartment buildings and multiple dwelling units where we need permission from property owners. But we have been focusing on bringing Fios to those particular apartment buildings. And we've been working with Boston Housing Authority since the beginning, since actually 2017. And today are in about half of the properties and working to try to round that out. We'd like to be in every single one of those properties. And then some of the properties that are being transferred, Boston Housing Authority transferred to other developers. We're working with all of those developers and are already in some of those buildings as well, and will continue to try to gain access. Additionally, as part of our partnership with the city, we did donate $100 million to the Boston's Digital Equity Fund in 2019 and 2020. It was in two $500,000 payments to ensure that nonprofits serving the public have the resources for tech skills training, connectivity offerings, and enabling residents online access to education, healthcare, employment, and other opportunities. We've also taken many steps over the years to ensure residents have access to broadband services by addressing digital equity. This is obviously a light had been shined on it during the pandemic, which we all know, and that's when Verizon started supporting and participating in the Affordable Connectivity Program. Verizon, as of a year ago, rolled out what we call Verizon Forward, and it's a zero-cost Fios internet product that is at our 300 over 300 megabit speeds. That is the speed that any customer can enter at, and that is more than enough broadband for a household of multiple people living in a household to be able to watch videos, work from home, do telehealth, all simultaneously. In addition to that, we are offering zero-cost 5G and LTE fixed wireless home services, and we have started rolling that out in Boston and some of our markets in Massachusetts where we do not offer Fios. We also acquired TracFone, which is a wireless mobile product, And they have a zero cost, I say they, it's us, our company, TracFone, have a zero cost mobile service that has now unlimited talk and text and offers up to 25 gigabits of high-speed data. We just upped those speeds. And people can get a free smartphone as well if they choose to go the mobile route. One of the other things I just wanted to mention during the pandemic, and I thought Santi's analogy was really good about, why there seemed like there was so much congestion. He said, just imagine if everybody took their car out in the streets of Boston. We know that there would be a log jam and nobody would go anywhere. And our networks actually did hold up very, very well considering when you think about it. But all of a sudden there was a huge spike in activity for all of the providers. We also realized there were a lot of kids that all of a sudden were home and didn't have access in their homes. So Verizon worked with the city. We worked with Mike Lynch in his office and the CIO at the time, and we donated $2.4 million worth of hotspots and 4G wireless data plans so that kids at least had mobile access while they're online. And they had access for the entire school year of the 2020 and 21 school year following those months, the early months of the pandemic. We also donated some tablets and other devices to fill in some gaps as well for that period of time. The other thing we're doing is working with Peter Favorito and Santi and his team to get the word out on the Affordable Connectivity Program. We participated in Unity Day events over the summer months with Boston Housing Authority. We've also formed other partnerships with other nonprofits, including Tech Goes Home, that's working on a pilot program with us to reach their students who they have trusted relationships with, who may have connectivity but not know that they can actually get a zero-cost option. And working with them, it's ISP agnostic, but they are just making sure, partnering with us and other providers, that they're getting that word out. And we're looking for more opportunities to continue to partner and spread the word on ACP and get more residents sign up. So basically, at the end of the day, we know, and we're talking about it, bridging this digital divide does take a village. It's based on strong ongoing partnerships between government, providers, and community-based organizations, and we are committed to that mission. And we do appreciate all the attention that the council and the city of Boston and all the resources you're putting in this space, and we look forward to continuing our work to bridge that divide.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Next up is Angela Holm, the Director of Government and Regulatory Affairs for Comcast for Greater Boston.
Good afternoon, Councilor. Thank you for having me. Angela Holm-Burson from Comcast here. We're always grateful for the opportunity to talk about digital equity because that's what we do. That's where we spend our philanthropic efforts. We've been working in this space since 2011 with our program, Internet Essentials. I think everyone in this room is familiar with that program, where you can access broadband internet for $9.95 a month. Post-pandemic, or in the trail end of this pandemic, we've now had Internet Essentials Plus, which is even double the speed for $29.95 a month. Most importantly, both of those costs are fully covered by the Affordable Connectivity Program, which is where we've spent a lot of our efforts in the last year or so. Along with our own individual efforts, just to name a few of our partnerships with BPS, we have our Internet Essentials Partnership Program, and through Mike Lynch and Do It, we were able to distribute vouchers for internet access, not only to BPS students, but to BHA and to a number of other organizations through the city. We work with BHA, Older Adults Technology Services, Tech Goes Home for over 10 years now, Up Education Network, Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts, Timothy Smith Network, One Bead, Central Boston Elder Services, and Bagley. Our partnerships are strong. We continue to work with them every day, every week. I can say just yesterday we were at the Mildred in Mattapan giving out laptops, trying to get people informed and signed up for ACP and Internet Essentials. It's a two-step program. Last week we're at Rosendale House working with seniors. We know that seniors are a particularly vulnerable population when it comes to understanding not only the connectivity piece, but the digital skills and necessary in order to actually take advantage of the resource. We've established over 30 lift zones in the city of Boston. So lift zones is one of Comcast's solutions to the digital divide that was birthed from the COVID-19 pandemic. As you know, Internet Essentials we've had going on since 2011. That being said, there's a lot of housing insecurity out there that even when we can get somebody connected to Internet Essentials at home, we realize there isn't always that home to connect someone to. And so in partnership with BCYF, 27 of our over 30 lift zones are BCYF community centers where we install our highest speed internet at no cost for a 3-year period. And those have been active and used, and we've gotten great feedback from our BCYF program managers about the success of that program. We also currently provide courtesy Wi-Fi to every common space in every BHA site. We still get these calls all the time from different building managers that if they're not aware, if they have not set up their internet account already, we get that situated for them. We hosted a Digital Equity Summit this past November where Santi spoke, and we had executive visitors from our own company just to shed more light on the issue, bring more attention to the lift zones and to the BCYF community centers, provided more funding so that they can expand on their programming as well. Yeah, and we're also continuing, you know, I know that we've mentioned telehealth a few times. We're continuing on those conversations. We are collaborating with Boston Medical Center. We're having conversations with MGH on how we can bridge that gap when it comes to telehealth as well. But the report made it clear, and we've talked about it, you know, everybody here today has talked about the ubiquitous nature of broadband, and the infrastructure is not the problem. It's the adoption that's the problem. And it's the trust that I know the city has mentioned that it can't gain the trust necessarily of residents. They don't trust us either. So I think that it really comes down to a number of partnerships and relationships between local government, the ISPs. I know Stephanie is working hard on this as well, and the community-based organizations to earn that trust. What it really comes down to is individual face-to-face contact and helping these people with this process to apply for the ACP and then to get that ACP applied to their ISP service. So thank you for having us, and happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you so much, Angela. Yeah, you have to go. Thank you so much, Angela. And now I want to let David Talbot from CTC Technology and Energy, since I didn't go to you during the prior panel, just if there's any thing you wanted to put on the record in relationship to any of what we've been talking about.
Well, thank you, Councilor. Name's Dave Talbot, Director of Research Services at CTC Technology and Energy. We're the firm that prepared the study referenced today. We serve public sector clients and nonprofit clients. We do not represent the internet service providers. We're pleased to assist the City of Boston with this study. And I did help Santi a little bit with the slide deck and provided him with slides, and I'm available for questions. I think you made a great point earlier in your comments about the city needing data, and you mentioned something about trying to line up SNAP data with Mass Health and so forth. And I think there is an issue there of the city not being able to get full data from the providers about, for example, how many people are using Internet Essentials, which is a great program from Comcast, which is $10 or $30 depending which one, and it can be free with ACP. But one of the data gaps would be, although the company will say how many have been enrolled over cumulatively, not what is the net number right now that are using the program. So these kinds of things, if you could get the data, and I realize Comcast is a private company, it would probably help, being able to identify where the gaps are. That is one area where, just a small point to make, the City of Boston is very lucky to have Fios now competing with Comcast. It makes Boston an exception among American cities, and it puts you in a very fortunate place. There are many of our city clients who would like to be in that position to have both a strong cable provider and a ubiquitous fiber provider. So that is some very good news for the city.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, no, and I think we're grateful for the whole ecosystem here, including both of our ISPs and the other ones who aren't represented on the panel today, and all of our nonprofits and the department. I mean, I think the way I feel about this work is that there are gaps, but it's very tangible, and I feel like we have more and more knowledge about what it is that we need, right? Like we know, like, you know, the numbers that alarmed me in this, in the midst of a lot of like good numbers, right, is, okay, we think we've got 29% uptake on ACP compared to these higher numbers of like Philly's got 44%, DC's got 56%, et cetera. So for me as a counselor, like that's one area where I'm like, okay, how are we getting more people signed up for ACP? Because I absolutely think like all of us need to go advocate to the feds to continue it and make sure that this becomes like a sort of permanent thing. And then, you know, and I analogize it to SNAP for a reason. SNAP is something where we know there's a federal entitlement, there's money that goes into that, and the question of how many Bostonians get that money is just how many sign up, right? And the reason that the questions I have for both of you, Stephanie and Angela, really are about that sign up process and what, I understand why, like, you know, there needs to be two steps in the sense of the feds have to say, yes, this person qualifies, and then they come over to you. But how can we make that piece, like, sort of two things. How do we make that piece of the process where the person actually signs up easier? What is the language access sort of strategy, and how can we bulk that up? And then this question about data, I mean, it just does feel to me like between the lists that everyone in this room has, we could identify a huge proportion of that 70% of the ACP qualified people who don't currently have it, right? And some of them, maybe they don't have it like by choice or because they're happy with their service or like whatever, right? Like, but yeah, it's always frustrating me when I feel like we have all the resources to solve a problem administratively, but we have kind of like things getting in the way. So I'd love to hear from both of you about that. And maybe, I don't know, Angela, if you want to go first.
Sure. So regarding the ACP process, so there's only so much we can do, right? This is a federal program, and that process is what it is. So what we have been doing, and despite the tedious nature of it, it is what it is going out to community centers, to senior housing buildings, to BHA Unity Days, and really this face-to-face interaction and helping residents and guiding them through this application step with ACP and getting them qualified. And that's how we've been approaching it. It's this grassroots, face-to-face effort, which is necessary in order to guide some of these people through the process. In terms of what it offers, I don't think you can market something much better than free money. This ACP benefit can apply to an existing bill. You don't have to go out and sign up for a new package or a new provider. That part, and I'm sure Stephanie can speak more to it, and I think that Peter Favorito from Do It would have a lot to say about the process as well. It really is about that face-to-face interaction. I think that the more collaborative partnerships in this space, the better. I know that, you know, what we as ISPs can bring to the city is the infrastructure, the program, the cost, the marketing, and what the city can help the ISPs with is that relationship building in the community. We do a lot of it on our own, but I think when you see partnerships come together, it makes it a lot more attractive, for lack of a better word, for your average resident to say, you know, they're willing to give this a try. And it's time consuming. You know, you have to get not only the ISPs there and the city partners there, but the residents have to be there in person for these types of events, but they are the most effective, is to get these done in person. In terms of our own Internet Essentials line and what you would have to do for that second step in order to apply your ACP to that, we have every language you can think of through our language line, so I know that's not a problem. I would say that having more, again, collaboration in person, especially for those language barriers, the ACP event, sign-up events that I have been to, it's been immensely helpful to have at least one bilingual person there and in person, and but that's really what it comes down to. It's this grassroots hand-holding. Digital navigators is the term that's used in the industry. I know it's for lack of a better term, that's where I think the greatest need is the digital navigator's role in bridging this understanding and the skills.
But what about this data matching point?
So there's certain constraints we're going to face with customer privacy and addresses. I know that in the past, so we've done a partnership with BHA in the past where we were able, and this is just one instance, where we were able to meet up with BHA staff in person to do a direct mailing to BHA residents so that they would be aware of one of these programs. It's going to be I would think it would be a privacy concern on both sides when we're talking about names and addresses.
Yeah, I guess I just wonder whether, and obviously, yeah, privacy concerns are real. I wonder if there would be a way, so I have two thoughts. One is like, even if you depersonalized information, let's say that I'm at BHA, it would be hugely helpful to me to know that like at this senior development, we've had great success, we've got an ASAP, whatever, and it looks like 40% of our, and with the buildings, it probably wouldn't be split this way, right? But like 40% of our seniors at this building are signed up with Verizon and another 40% are signed up with Comcast. And it seems like we've just got 20% who aren't using anybody's ACP, right? And maybe it's because they're using mobile or one of the other, right, whatever. And it's sort of like, okay, my sense that I've penetrated this elderly development pretty well is validated, right? Versus like, oh, I'm looking at Ruth Barclay Apartments, right, Cathedral, and without giving me anybody's specific address, I give you guys a list from the BHA, and what I get back is like, yeah, we've got 5% of those people, and we've got 10% of those people, right? And it tells me like, hey, a really dedicated drive, scheduling an event, because I agree with you, the grassroots stuff is important. People have to, and honestly, doing things on site is great, because if people can go and get their documents, I mean, it's, something we were talking about, like, I think that's great. But the problem is when we're trying to solve a scale problem, a thing that we say we can only chunk one by one, like we're never gonna speed up on the scale, and we gotta do that. So to me, it's like, so if you can't work harder, you work smarter, right? And working smarter would involve kind of pooling our collective data in a way that, and it does feel to me like there is probably a space that like deals with the privacy concerns and still would help us do that targeting better. So that's my thought. And then my other thought is that, I mean, sometimes the way that we get over these things is that there's some kind of, there might be, and this is probably a heavier lift because dealing with the federal government is often a heavier lift, but like there's a world in which like could the HUD entity talk to the FCC folks, and could we at the Housing Authority get a list of everybody who's gotten a unique identifier, and be like, oh, these are all our people who haven't even done step one, in a way that like doesn't involve you guys, right? Like that would be a kind of interesting other question, which would keep things intergovernmental, which is sometimes a little easier on the privacy side, because that's really what happened. The reason I'm pushing this is, and I keep going back to the Mass Health SNAP gap example, is that for decades, people have been talking about the SNAP gap, and for decades, our approach has been a version of face-to-face, go to the farmers markets, talk to the people, tell them don't they know that they're qualified for SNAP, have somebody outside the nurse's office, hey, have you signed up for SNAP? All really great, well-intentioned, and moving things on the margins. Didn't come close to moving it like aligning the administrative process did, right? So it's just like, that's the piece where I'm like, okay, if we really want to change this number, how do we do something there? So, but Stephanie, did you want to speak on this?
Sure, and I don't know if I have the magic answer either, but I think we're open to having these discussions and figuring how we can be more efficient, because we do recognize the two-step process. Yes, the federal government does have to qualify, but can we be advocating that gets a little bit more streamlined? Like if you live in housing, you should just automatically get qualify, because you do automatically qualify. Right. But how do you get that number? Right. And then two, as a provider, what can we share? Because in some cases, we'll know in a building, right, whether it's Boston Housing or a high rise in the Seaport, we know how many customers we have in that building. What we don't know, though, is the full scope of who would qualify, right, of our customers. So ACP is a little bit more generous in the income eligibility, up to 200% of the poverty level. So there are people that are in the middle class that actually could qualify. So we don't really, as a provider, we know they pay for our service. They don't live in Boston Housing Authority or senior housing. They live in a house or they live in an apartment somewhere else, but they might qualify and they might be our customer. Those are some of the harder ones to capture that do qualify. So I think sometimes there are going to be gaps there. But I think it's, you know, getting creative. We'd have to take things back. Obviously, there are privacy issues. We could have database constraints that I don't even know about, that I'm, you know, as I sit here. But I think, you know, getting creative and trying to crack it. But I think what Angie said is true, and Marvin's nodding, is one of the reasons we partner with Tech Goes Home, among others, we also have other partnerships too, is first of all, Tech Goes Home has been doing this work for 20 plus years and is a national leader, and we're lucky that you're here. But they have the trusted relationships. Even the city of Boston, when Peter Favorito goes out and represents the city of Boston with digital navigators, that's a trusted, there is more trust for that than a private company coming in. But together, we really do, when we go to these events and when we talk about ACP, we really, really care about the digital equity piece. Yes, do we want our share of some of those customers? Of course we do. But we really care more that people are signing up and using this, because we also, like you, want to advocate that this becomes a permanent program. And right now, we know that there's a limit to the time frame. So whatever we can be doing quickly to make sure, at least within our communities, we can get people signed up, great. And in the meantime, we'll keep doing the grassroots thing, right? And hopefully in a place like Boston, we can move the mark a little bit, but there's more that needs to be done.
Great. And Marvin, do you want to speak to this a little bit and sort of like what, because I know Tech Goes Home is sort of working on this, cracking this difficult challenge of how do you follow up with people enough that they actually get all the way through the 2 steps and stuff. But can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we've worked with Verizon particularly on this project, and it has been a challenge. You know, it's a challenge to access people, then it's another challenge to actually communicate with them as well, because there are different barriers of which they consist of. And so there's a language barrier, or there is a comprehension challenge, or there's just you know, they're unavailable. You know, I mean, I've spoken to participants that we've enrolled where literally it took me about 5 calls to just get them to the first step of enrollment, let alone the second step. And that's connecting with an ISP, which has its own challenges in itself. And there's a lot of layers. So you hear about other cities that have higher numbers. I'm always questioning, what is their process? Like, what are they doing that is giving them this this increase? Or, you know, what is it that they're not doing that we're not aware of, right? There has to be a sort of, you know, there's not a one-stop shop approach, but we need to create some sort of systems around this. You know, and I appreciate you all in your work, but we need some internal work in the ISPs as well on how you have a field team that actually triages these concerns, because the experience that I'm having on the ground as someone who knows how to navigate these terrains, my learners are not dealing with this, they're not having the same management to do so. Mm-hmm. So we have to actually spend our time in conjunction with the learner to walk through the entire process. Otherwise, they probably will not enroll because it's too complicated for them. And, you know, it was great for the federal government to come up with this idea, but they never thought about operationalizing it. And there was never any mandates around how this was to be rolled out by ISPs. And so I think we're all going through a pilot. So it's, you know, and this process right now is I'm just hoping that we find an endpoint where we start to decide on what things do we have to put in place to create success. Because right now I don't think we have a real definition of what success looks like. And it's not just saying that we've enrolled them in the ACP program. That's not enough of success for me. I need to understand, and in TGH we all need to understand that our learners are not only enrolled, but they actually have suitable access and that they can actually use the internet and free flowing in their home with more than two individuals in the home simultaneously, using it with no barriers. And that, to me, is not a part of the conversation that I'd love for us to get to at some point.
Great, thank you. Just a couple more questions, both for Comcast and Verizon. So on the Internet Essentials, you said the Internet Essentials Plus was sort of double the speed. What are those speeds for Internet Essentials and Internet Essentials Plus?
So Internet Essentials is 50/10, and Internet Essentials Plus is 100/10.
100/10. Okay, and so, but what are you guys doing? Because presumably now that we have ACP, somebody who's living with Internet Essentials who qualifies for ACP should really be going to Internet Essentials Plus. Right? Because it's a much better, so what's your guys' messaging around that? Like, are people finding out that there's now this better option for them?
Again, yes, so a lot of that, again, is the grassroots. We're going out to these community centers and talking to, a demographic that would likely be eligible to inform them and let them know at that time, if you sign up for ACP at this time, we can directly apply it to the Internet Essentials Plus for the increased speed.
And did ACP start before or after Internet Essentials Plus came in?
I'd have to check the timing on that for you.
So another question I have is, what I would like as a public official is for Verizon to automatically upgrade everyone who's on ACP on Internet Essentials to Internet Essentials Plus. Right.
It'd be tough for Verizon to do that, but
Not Verizon, sorry, Comcast, my apologies. No, I'm not siding with anyone in a competitive market, no, but because ideally from my perspective, if you guys are getting paid by the feds anyways, why not just upgrade everyone on Internet Essentials to Internet Essentials Plus?
That's a good point that I'll be taking back. I just wanted to circle back to the original point about the efficiency of data sharing and honestly exchange of ideas. To the point made earlier about the community coalition and ISPs being involved in that, I only see good things resulting from that. Would love to be in the room to have those discussions.
And sorry, Stephanie, will you remind me, the 300/300 service that you guys have, in my head I have that's 60, but you get 30 and there's a match or something, like how?
Oh, right.
Sorry, how does that, what's the best service I get if I want to use ACP and not pay additional money?
Basically, so today I actually looked at what are we offering. If I were to purchase today 300/300, we actually have an offer that's $49.99 a month. It sometimes is $59.99 a month. This is what competition does, though, right? It brings prices down. But then when you add fees in and any other extra charges, you really are in this probably mid-60s, $65 a month. So what Verizon does for ACP qualified customers is the stipend is $30 from the government, right? And what we do is it's zero cost. We cover the fees, any equipment charges, everything. So if you qualify for ACP, you get that 300/300 for $0 a month. So it's kind of a cost share. Verizon kind of splits it.
Got it. And do you,
it's just credited.
Do you think, though, that that's clear to people? And the reason I'm asking that is because I think that's amazing, right? Like it's higher quality up and down. But if I think I've got $30 to spend in your store, as it were, and I see that something is $50 or $60 a month, like is the person who I'm calling when I sign up for ACP telling me no, you get this one for free, or like how does that information get shared?
So all of our advertising on our website, and if you go online to look at something, or you're listening, you're on hold, it says, it's called Verizon Forward. It's zero cost ACP. So it says zero. So I think, zero cost, it's the $sign and a zero. So, and that's pretty prominent in the advertising. So I do think that it is absolutely clear.
Okay. And when you guys are doing the visits to the, BHA and other community sites and whatever, is it always the housing authority or the public side that's providing the translation, or do you guys hire and bring in translators?
So we don't hire translators. Sometimes we have people on our marketing teams that might be Spanish bilingual, for example, or Vietnamese, but we don't cover every language that covers. We do have call centers that have a full range of foreign languages, but in person, often it is working with whoever's at the housing authority. One of the things we talked about when we're thinking of partnerships, I think I mentioned to you, Kenzie, when we met last week, we also have a relationship with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement, and we were just talking with some of the folks over there saying, it would be great to be able to tap into some of the nonprofits that you work in the neighborhood. So if we know we're in Chinatown, to bring maybe a community partner that can help translate in Chinatown. So if somebody walks into the community room, but they don't have an English-speaking friend with them, that we're able to actually communicate with them. So I do think, again, that's a partnership thing, because clearly we won't have every marketing team won't be able to cover every language spoken in the city of Boston, which is quite extensive.
I was just going to say, Stephanie is telling a familiar story. So in terms of language access, at our call center, you can access pretty much any language that's necessary. But when it comes to these face-to-face events, it's either our own internal resources from our teammates or the partnerships that we're working through. And I also just wanted to make one correction. The Internet Essentials Plus is 100 over 20.
Okay.
And it did arise during the COVID-19 pandemic, which I still am not sure we're still in it, but.
During the ongoing, yes. Okay, yeah, and sorry, Marvin, did you want to get in on
Yeah, I just
translation?
wanted to highlight something I didn't get to mention, that most of the folks we are enrolling in ACP are actually not using home internet. They're applying it to their cell phones. So, there are different measuring sticks, so we start deciding what success looks like. I think we really need to investigate, add that to the equation around what's our North Star? Is it to get people hardware in their homes, or is it to get cell phone support? And what is the most beneficial? Because at the end of the day, there's no direct pathway to this at this point.
Right. And I would be very interested in, because it would seem to me like there are probably some people for whom, they're so mobile that applying it to their cell phones is the right choice.
Yeah.
And I could also imagine that there are people who, because they don't have internet at home right now, are used to using their cell phones, and are therefore applying it to their cell phones rather than maybe realizing the level of quality of service that they could have at home with ACP, right? So it's a little bit,
Or
again,
it's a cost factor, right? And,
Right.
there's a savings attached to their cell phone service that, they haven't found another way for subsidy. So
right.
there's always multiple ways. But I just wanted to make a point of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think the point that I would make on language access is just, I think that we at the city have really gone in the last few years, and actually the BHA as an organization was ahead of the city on this, mainly because of a lawsuit like a decade or more ago. But we've been going through a transition from kind of that sort of casual language access, which is we happen to have folks on staff who can speak various things, to kind of more systemic language access. And language lines are an important piece of that, but with face-to-face stuff, there's just no substitute for in-person translators. And the reality is that, to have great in-person translators, especially ones who know all the subject area lingo, right, which can be important in areas like this, people have to get paid for that work. And so I think we've really transitioned more and more to putting money aside in order to be hey, it's going to be the success of this thing hinges on us being able to talk to Spanish speakers. So it's not going to be an accident whether we have the Spanish person. And also we're not going to bring a heritage Spanish speaker who feels slightly unconfident about their way of describing megabytes, right? And have them be the person and be oh, you're Latinx, so you can do this, right? I mean, we're going to kind of say, hey, this is essential to the operation, so we're going to hire somebody with expertise in it. And I think, and I want to sort of make that point both on the CBO side, but also to the providers, because I think that one of the things I heard today, right, is that aside from our senior population, which definitely has lots of pockets of different types of language access, that it sounds like our data suggests there's a real deficit in the Spanish-speaking community. And so that seems like, even if we can't bring all of the languages on hand, and of course, certain sites you would know, oh, we should bring a Haitian Creole speaker, or we should bring, an Arabic speaker here, or whatever. It seems like maybe we do have to have a deliberate Spanish language strategy that involves some kind of intentional and it costs a little bit of money, like Spanish language resource. So.
Well, there's data out there that indicates that traditional mail works for Hispanic communities, while local TV and radio works better in African American communities. Mm-hmm. So the data is starting to try to identify the best methods for making creating awareness, but it's also about trying to draw in on what is going to lead us towards full enrollment. So those conversations are starting to exist. I'm happy to share the information later time.
That's great data to have. And I just think I think it's actually nice that, to your guys' point, like that there's so much interest alignment here, right? That like for the ISPs and the community-based organizations and the city, we all just want to maximize ACP enrollment. Yeah. Like, so let's just
we're just going to all hug and figure it out.
Yeah, we just gotta, and throw everything we can at it. I mean, and just a couple more questions, and then I swear I'm almost done. This is the hazard. See, most of the counselors leave, but then it means I can just ask all my questions. So sorry. So one question is about this wiring point. So what if anything, two questions. Santi kept referring to the fact that you guys need landlords to let you into buildings. And I guess what I want to understand about that is he just referring to the case where one or the other provider has an exclusive arrangement with a building? Because those seem like, since they're legal arrangements, one is sort of stuck on that front. Or is there also a category of cases where there is no exclusive arrangement, building owners just don't feel like it? Can somebody clarify that for me?
I could probably talk about that because we're the ones trying to get into it.
Oh, I see. Okay, sorry, this is an asymmetric situation.
I see. To get into that. There are, I would think, the minority of reasons we can't get into a building are exclusivity agreements. There are some that Comcast might have with a provider, but sometimes it's just not a priority for the management company. They might be located somewhere else. And then when you get to smaller properties, which are even harder, there might be someone that has a portfolio of smaller properties, but it's not like a corporation like Wynn or Trinity, where you know who the leaders are of that organization, and you can reach out and kind of work your way, through it that way. So sometimes sometimes they say no. You reach them and they say no. We don't want the disruption. Because Verizon brings fiber to every apartment. So that can be a little disruptive, just because it's a little bit of construction going on. We try to do it in the least disruptive way possible by running moldings and not having to drill through walls, but at the end of the day, we bring fiber to every apartment. So the wiring issue, because we're a new network, our fiber goes right to the apartment. For us, the speeds should be maximized right to the door of the apartment or the utility closet in the apartment. What happens with the router or something else could be another story. But that can be, if you have 50 apartments in a building and you're bringing, when we get a partnership agreement that's signed by a landlord or a property owner to let us in, we aren't going to run the fiber to 20 apartments. We don't have to get into the apartments per se, but we have to have it so that if they call for service, now all we have to do is put a terminal in their utility closet because there's access to it right there. So that's kind of the issue with it can be disruptive, and sometimes people are. It's not that they don't want you to go, but it's called a passive refusal. Think about you own a property. You might even be someone that you and your partner have full-time jobs and you own a few properties. It's just not a priority. So that's a passive refusal. When you just can't reach them, you keep calling and calling, and they're not saying no, but they're not responding.
There are other variables too, like once you get in the building, who actually owns the wiring, and then you get into liability issues. And but I think you see this access issue. I mean, it's really only with these multiple dwelling units, and it's also about demand. A property owner might be more responsive if there's a greater demand from a larger number of residents as opposed to one or two or three. So you'll see those issues as well.
Got it. And then can you, sorry, Angie, just not to pick on you, but just this point in my thing about how we have like total enrollment in Internet Essentials for a decade, but we don't have the current enrollment numbers. What's the backstory on that?
So that's internal data that I have access to, that my team has access to. When we went back and forth with David, I think for about a 1.5-year span, in putting the report together. It's just how our internal data is structured and what I do and don't have access to. So we were able to provide an aggregate number of IE subscribers in the city of Boston since we established the program in 2011.
But it seems obvious that that Comcast, the company, must know how many Internet Essentials subscribers you have in Boston today.
I'm not saying we don't know. I'm saying I don't have access to that data.
Right. And so what about inside of this affordable connectivity program total number? So like it was 29,000 at this snapshot and now it's 33. Do we, the city, know how many of those are how many of those are signed up with each of you? Like, do we know how many of the 33,000 ACP households are signed up with Comcast and how many of them are signed up with Verizon right now?
I would think not.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't know the answer.
I don't think that any data that the city is receiving would go to that level of detail.
Okay.
You get data from the FCC.
Yeah,
right.
It's FCC data.
It's not coming from the providers.
How many are in the city, full stop, and it's not broken out by which provider.
Yeah, I guess it's just like, again, I mean, it's like when you're trying to solve a problem, you want to know as much information about it as possible. So it's like a little bit like, to me, and especially because I know that, we have a lot, obviously, of the city right now that you both serve, and then there's these other, but there are pockets, right, where it's really still like more one or the other. Maybe that's just Beacon Hill where I live.
I think Beacon Hill's unique in a lot of things.
but yeah, that's not, Beacon Hill's also not our main focus on ACP, so I want to acknowledge that.
One quick additional point, though, is, we came up with a number of potentially eligible households of 86,000, but that's a math exercise based on demographics and, various data sources that we have used to try to estimate. But we don't really know what the ceiling is because, as you pointed out earlier, there could be a lot of very elderly people who may not want or need a broadband subscription, or others who are happy with their phone subscription. And there's going to be some ceiling that's less than the theoretical maximum. And it's sort of an art of trying to say what is that actual number that you're going to hit and not get any farther because there just isn't much more demand for it.
Totally, but my gut would say that we're well below.
For sure.
If we think of that as the drop ceiling, right?
Yes.
There's the real structural ceiling and there's the drop ceiling, and then we're somewhere below that, right? Because I would guess that just based on the feedback that the council gets from constituents, we're definitely not yet at the place where everybody.
I didn't mean to suggest that otherwise, but yeah.
But maybe it's right. The theoretical number is at 86, or who knows how many, right? And maybe there's really an appetite for 70, or something, and then it's like, and then we're at 33, and so it's kind of.
And that's where it differs from your snap gap analogy, because obviously you'd want everybody to have, and everybody would want to have it.
Yeah, I just think that the space between the ultimate ceiling and the drop ceiling has decreased over the course of the pandemic, because I think more people have ended up needing internet because we've moved so many things onto the internet than used to be the case.
And some people can get free Wi-Fi in certain areas and are using that.
Right, and that might be enough as well. Okay, I think those are all of my questions for today. I want to just quickly check if any of you had anything final you wanted to say before I just check whether we have public testimony. Anything else? Okay, great. Well then, thank you to this panel so much for all your partnership. We really appreciate it. definitely for me as the chair of this committee with the innovation technology brief, it's like great to hear from and know all of you.
Quick question, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure, Marvin.
Is there a rationale internally for you all as ISPs of sharing data? Is it privatization, or what are the
Customer
what is the
data is
rationalization?
typically, it's private, information, and typically wouldn't be shared under other circumstances, not just ACP. What I'm wondering, though, in an aggregate sense, if we would be, and I don't know this, because again, this is so new for all of us,
Right.
would we go back and be willing to say, like, all right, maybe we wouldn't go to the building level, but within the city of Boston, we know we have X percentage of customers. I mean, typically, we don't like to share our penetration rates on our general, right? Because I'm sitting here with my friendly competitor here, and she doesn't want me to know that too. So some of it, I think, is the proprietary nature, but then also the personal, keeping people's.
What I mean, even like zip code related, like,
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I think, it's something we definitely can go back and ask these questions, because I'm sure others are asking us for this information too.
Yeah, we're just trying to figure out ways of zoning in to figure out.
Yeah, to focus your
It's
efforts.
a good question.
And I'll just say, we had an interesting experience in the pandemic. Our hospitals citywide used to jealously guard their bed occupancy numbers, emergency room numbers, et cetera. Very similar theory, right? Of we're all competing against each other. We don't need each other. We don't need to air our dirty laundry. We don't need to know where we're successful and we're not, et cetera. Then the pandemic has created a situation where we absolutely had to share those numbers, and everyone was being like, oh my God, I have 20 more people than I can right now. Do you have 20 beds? And we're shifting folks around. And I just think that it's just an example of sometimes the situation changes and then it becomes, and it's not like they all shared all their proprietary information with each other, but it was kind of like, oh, there's this thing that we are trying to solve for, right? And there was kind of a collective, and the city was a partner in that too. So it's just another.
I just lastly would just, as you all are having conversations, I'd love to get some time to talk about it, because I think for us particularly, it would help us as we are trying to define the outcome of our learners' experience, and how do we ensure that they are receiving adequate services, and we don't want to just say we've given them something and provided it to them, but not be clear on what they've received, right? So be helpful to continue those.
Yeah, and I think we know you've
Yeah,
been working at all levels
absolutely.
at Verizon, so we definitely can raise
Absolutely.
that
We can have
to leadership, and
Yes.
let's have that discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. And I'm just gonna check whether, do we have any? Okay, we don't have anybody signed up for public testimony. However, if you are watching this hearing after the fact and you want to put something on the record with the city council, please email ccc.csit@boston.gov. I am sure that this is something that the committee is going to continue to very actively pursue in partnership with the department and all of our partners. So thank you. And with that, this hearing of the Boston City Council's Committee on City Services and Innovation Technology is adjourned.
All right. Thank you.